Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my friend, partner, and known to many as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, South Dakota's favorite son, Wes Brown.
I'm trying to be the most interesting man. Never say no to an adventure. So if anybody out there has an adventure for me to try, well, maybe I shouldn't say this. Let me know. We should not say that.
Wife carrying, Norwegian belly flopping. Wes has done it all.
Man,
and you notice,
wish this was a video show.
And you notice I put that quite possibly in there.
Quite possibly. Right. Because we're trying to protect ourselves from liability.
From some kind of trademark issue with
infringement.
Dos Equis.
Exactly.
Legal parameter.
That's right. Exactly. But we are, Dos Equis, we are available for a replacement of your most interesting man with possibly most interesting man. So give us a call.
Wes is available. Wes.
Yes.
Got out and saw some art in your...
I did.
In your town this past weekend?
In our one horse town? No, it's not a small town. Yeah, I actually did saw some great art, and it's nice to get out and see people, and there was a lot of people out, which isn't too surprising in South Dakota because we never experienced the lockdown quarantine of the COVID virus. But anyway, yeah, it was nice to see people. You
went to the Doll Art Center?
I did go to I went to the Doll Art Center, and they had 2 shows. But
it was enjoyable. People were out.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I got out on Friday for First Friday, and it finally felt like a First Friday, first time in months. I didn't go to my regular haunts. I stayed out of the art district on Santa Fe, and kind of hit some different galleries around the city, which I haven't done in a while. And I was happy to see people out and about. I went to Bridge, that we'll talk about this evening, and saw 3 phenomenal shows there. They have Sarah Bowling in the front room with her show The Consequence of Falling, and then behind that was Ramel, Supersonic Nonplace, and then they had Artist Collective, Intervisions Collective, which was Scale, Reconciling the Systems of Measuring. All 3 incredibly strong, phenomenal exhibits. And so if you're down on Platte Street, hit Bridge up and check out those shows. Then I headed out to Lakewood to Valkyrie Gallery, and I saw Cody Keel's show Exiles out there. That was fantastic. I didn't realize that was his first solo show of that amount of work. So that was cool to see all his work in person. And then I finished up at Blue Tile Gallery, which is a new gallery here in Denver, actually down in Inglewood on South Broadway, and saw Not So Black and White, which was co-curated by Courtney Cotton and Lee Labier. They had some phenomenal artists in that show, including Daniel Sprick, who we've interviewed on this program. So definitely go check that out. I think that one actually closes this weekend. So if you're down on South Broadway, go give Blue Tile Gallery some love. All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Great stuff. And then I saw pictures on Facebook and stuff that was posted at some of the galleries that I usually go and visit. And it actually looked like there's a lot of people out looking at art. So finally, we're kind of, I think, back to getting, to some kind of semblance of normalcy.
Yeah, it seemed like Bit Factory was really busy too.
Yeah.
I seen on Facebook, the people outside. So that's great.
Yep. Happy to see it happening. All right. We're going to talk about art. Our guest this week is a remarkable designer and artist, a man with a vision for art in the community and a champion of artists and the arts here in Denver. His website is Tarazzovo.com, Tarazzovo, and his Instagram is bmatarazzo1. Welcome to the program, Brett Matarazzo.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Did I pronounce all that stuff all right?
I made an incredibly, poignant decision early on in my art kind of company / career that I decided I would take the M and the A off my name and just call it Tarazzo. But then I called it Tarazzo Vintage Original. So when I got the website, Tarazzo and a VO at the end just trips everybody out. So it's technically Tarazzo VO, which is random as all hell. But No, it's just funny because I thought, I want to do something a little different, but it's okay because of the media that I have, my website's probably the most antiquated, and Instagram is probably the best spot, as it were, anyway. So
good,
but everything else is good. Matarazzo is exactly right.
Fantastic. Before we get into the thick of things, I want you to take a moment and tell our listeners what mediums you work in and what kind of work that you do, Brett. Great.
Thank you. I actually had a little fun over the weekend doing a little kind of old school kind of outdoor art, getting to talk to real people, but I love doing that because I get to talk about that a lot. And I'm kind of a enigma, so to speak. I mean, not really, but I started out, got my BFA at DU and started out both kind of paralleling in the design program, fine art, and then photography. And always started with oil and pastels and drawing. Never really painted, but that kind of led me down a path that was more mixed media. So I started experimenting with stuff in the design lab, and that I was also doing with kind of photography, and then also kind of playing around with kind of wood and canvas and other stuff. So I'm essentially a mixed media artist. I use some unusual process. I use a transfer base that is different than most. I actually use a heat-based transfer on wood. Again, something I just started playing with and really started to really love because of the nature of the kind of reclaimed and repurposed materials I used. And then paint kind of came later. I mean, I always drew, but I started using acrylic on that wood and still do, sometimes palette knife, sometimes brush. I've really been, I think, exposed to a lot of different materials and other things and processes that are more industrial based, just having worked in advertising for a long time, which is kind of my way into kind of the real world, was not straight into art. And that led me into places like using kind of laser etching and laser cutters, experimented a little bit with kind of 3D printing and some CNC stuff with some help of some other friends around town. But essentially, I'm a mixed media artist working on wood, and really my work centers around, I guess, my personal belief system, which is I care deeply about nature. I care deeply about how humanity treats the natural world. And I can't really separate my art and my belief systems. And so most of my work centers in this very specific place about how we can kind of remind people about humanity and the imposition it sometimes poses, and most of the time poses, on our natural world. So that's where the center point of my work.
Where does that love of nature come from?
It's a great question. We were all bantering a little bit before we got on camera or radio here, but my parents came from the East Coast, and just by the nature of the density of trees and kind of Long Island in the East, my dad loved trees. He ended up finding his way kind of to the West. He just fell in love with the mountains. And so I think by and large, I grew up in Colorado from about 4.5, 5 on, and we used to just go up and do a little camping. We would do just day trips up to Mount Evans and, sit around the river up there and just fish out of water. We looked like a bunch of, New York Italians hanging around the river up on Mount Evans. It's kind of funny, but it was fun. We had fun. And I didn't realize at the time, it really made a pretty big impression on me through my, somewhat formative years. I was more of an athlete and that kind of stuff. And of course we skied and did outdoor stuff, but it wasn't like the mountains were, and the trees and the outdoors were my focus. It was more kind of traditional sports. It wasn't really more until after kind of high school and into college that I really started to kind of connect back with nature completely. And a lot of that just comes from my dad. We planted tree after tree after tree, in his yard and tried every type that wasn't supposed to grow here. And so I think it's funny enough, like his love of trees more so even than of nature, but he just loved trees and he loved the growth of that. And I think that gave me the baseline of being in Colorado, which I think a lot of people here have always kind of had an affinity towards nature, then being part of it through my youth, having this kind of drive to see things grow and be planting and that kind of stuff through most of my youth and into high school. And then afterwards, just really understanding, I think, more of what I cared about and the simplicity of nature. And then really eventually more of the plight of it, late 90s, and understanding what we were kind of doing. I think everyone kind of understood more what was happening, how humanity was really affecting the natural world and this thing we built. So yeah, that's kind of the journey of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we've come a long way since the 70s or even the 70s, at least for me, the 60s and 70s was kind of the the beginning of that transition of like being awake about how we're treating the environment and nature. And I think we've come a long ways. And obviously we're still fighting the fight. There's still people out there that think climate change isn't real, that it's just a cyclical thing, that we'll get out of it. But man, the younger generations are really starting to embrace it as well, as I think. So I think there's hope,
Yeah. I agree with you. So one of the things that I think we'll talk about on this podcast, probably, I would bet, just knowing where my heart and head is the ability to be, to let art be for all people and to connect on all levels. And galleries and museums are great, but sometimes, local stuff, even your local, farmers market where the artists are there, or even a great festival that's local or even national, can be a great way to connect with real people that don't always get a chance to be, complete students of kind of the contemporary art world and the art world overall. And so I absolutely love with my work, which is about kind of trying to affect people in their thought process around how they're treating nature every day. I love doing those things. I did one this weekend over in Park Hill, a little art festival. But my point in that is simply, I agree with you. I meet such a range of people, and the young people in particular are incredibly astute and valuable and understand because of essentially what they're being left, that what this is about. And so everyone I meet, all these young people are in some sort of environmental science. They're in school for environmental sociology, environmental mechanics, and all these other things. And it is, I think, so prevalent in their world that they know what they have to do, from 50 years from now. What is their life going to be like? So I agree with you that we've done a lot of work. I've done some great pieces over the last, year and a half with all that we've seen, society and the world, certainly COVID and a lot of the other kind of social constructs. I've done some pieces, and I'm going to be fair. I'm still pissed at humanity a little bit. I still think we've struggled to get out of our own way, and there's lots of reasons for that. And kind of, I think, philosophically, which is where my head tends to end up. But this human experiment, I call it, is still just that. And I think trying to figure out what this massive humanity is at 7-8 billion people, how that can truly actually be in balance with the natural world is still kind of a crapshoot. And I do believe if we don't really pay attention more, that will become pretty hard. But I'm very proud of at least where we're going right now. Not necessarily as proud in the near recent past, but I'm proud of where we're going. And I do think people really care. And I think I say it all the time. You don't have to believe that man made a big dent in this problem. It doesn't really matter, but you do have to believe that the climate is changing, and you may want to be part of the solution as opposed to adding more to the problem. And that's the way I put it with people that come into, to my gallery, my booth, whatever you want to call it, is let's all at least know that it's happening, whether you believe it was man-made or not. Let's try not to add to it. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, why can't we just care about our environment and be stewards of the earth, right? Despite everything else that, gets thrown into the mix of politics and all the other stuff, it's like, just take care of it. This is the only planet we have, at least right now. And, you have young kids, I have children, Wes has children and grandchildren. It's them that are going to have to deal with the repercussions of what has happened with previous generations. So just trying to be cognizant and try to, be better, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always wrapped up in the idea of how this humanity comes to pass, right? Like how we grow to the point where we, can get to these mass cities, and this idea of this growth and the sentiment of all that is kind of this progress that we've done. And really we're talking about, of course, we're talking about 2,000 years, but really talking about, 300 or 400 years, maybe less, of real kind of exponential, fast moving kind of industrial, really 150 if you really get after it. I use a lot of these kind of metaphors or elements of metaphors for how these growths happen in my work. But to me, it comes back to, I say this often, people know me, individual people, we are good. You know what I mean? Like the idea of loving our neighbor and all that stuff, almost always good. We really are. Of course, we can argue like ideology and that stuff. But one of the things I constantly go back to, and what I struggle with a little bit is the idea of the mass of us together kind of tragically flawed, meaning it's so difficult in the process that we've created for ourselves. And just the pure needs, the industrialism, I mean, quite literally having the jobs for as many people as we have, all those things, is that mass of humanity in all these different places. Is it possible for that to be a good for all? And I still struggle sometimes with that kind of growth and just constant push forward that is humanity, and whether or not, whether we know it or not. I often say it's almost impossible for an individual to be not part of the environmental problem right now, the way our society's set up. I say you'd have to be, someone off the grid, South Dakota, Montana, Colorado, and literally kind of living off the land for you not to be at least a little small part of the problem, right? Because that's the thing we've set up. That's how we've done it. It's very hard not to be part of the energy consumers or the kind of the food kind of system and or even and that's this basic people trying to make their way every day. You know what I mean? Like just trying to make a literal living every day. So I think about those things, and that's why my work tries to chip away at it in a small way and remind people just little things you can do. Try not to overwhelm people, but little things you can do to just change the sentiment of society of like, okay, I'm not going to change to pedaling a bike to run my TV. I'm not going to do that, but I might repurpose something, and that might keep something out of the waste stream. And that might also keep me from buying something that potentially, a lot of energy was used instead of just having the thing already existing. So to me, it's these little movements. And that's the way I kind of push a lot of my work, which is, they're meant to kind of push grand ideas and even a little difficulty and make people stop and say, what the heck is that? But in the end, the conversation that it's meant to portray is more about each person taking stock of the little things they do. And as we do that as a group more and more long-term, then it builds. It really does build. So sorry if I kind of looped around there.
Yeah, and I think we're getting pretty close to especially in the Southwest. I was just seeing a news piece today about how the drought down there is really starting to affect the water levels. And it's been for the past few years, the water levels of like Lake Powell and all those are dropping drastically. And they were saying they're going to have to cut 25%, or they've already cut 25% of the power in the Hoover Dam because they don't have the water level enough to do it. So, and they're going to cut down 25% roughly in 2022 or 23 of water flowing to the Southwest. And it's going to affect the farmer, because the residents have priority over the farmer. So irrigation is going to be, so they're really starting to struggle with this. Yeah. And it came sooner than I thought. My daughter lives in Arizona, and I've been down there a few times, and it's, and Phoenix is growing and Vegas is growing. And it's just like, at what point is there a breaking point? And the drought that Colorado's had, well, we're in a drought right now and up in South Dakota. I think we're going to start seeing some bigger ramifications over the next decade.
I agree. I think the water thing is a big deal. I think obviously it's all connected, particles in the air and how that affects heat, and certainly how that affects, but I say this all the time, and I will try not to feel like a pessimist on this, because to me, I am still an optimist in most percentage of my life, but I think realism is important in understanding what we're facing. The idea of kind of each person, taking a little bit of stock, doing their part, thinking through it, paying attention to it, but understanding that the biggest imbalance right now that I see, and this is where the whole kind of value system of the conscious nature of humanity and like how different that is than the rest of the natural world, is we just have a lot of people in the world. And I say, if you took 7 billion of any mammal and put it on this earth, it would have a hard time sustaining itself. And if you add industrialism on top of that, you get a sense of, and this is why I tell people, especially when we talk about like, do you believe it or not? Do you think we made an impact or not? If you had 7 billion elephants, you think it wouldn't make a massive impact on this earth? If you had 7 billion tigers or even alligators, it just as we are out of balance as a species, and we again for the thing that we built, and again, no fault to the individual human, right? We want people to live. We want them to have beautiful lives. We want to talk about our grandkids. We want to talk about my kids and yours. It's all for the right reasons, but that's where I sometimes feel like there's a tragic Achilles heel to this, that it's harder because there's a mass around that. And so I say this a lot, and one of the last pieces I did for one of the shows we did here at Bridge, Michael Dowling, my partner, his construct of True West 2 years ago and Wild Wild this year was, the kind of contemporary version of Western art. Well, my piece was all about, the fire map of the West from 2020 and just showing that. And then in I guess not juxtaposition, but in kind of reference to my work over the top, some of the transfers from the graphic illustration that portrayed was, two elements. One was kind of a reference to, energy consumption. It was kind of a 1920s oil field, turns on its side, kind of looked like a dilapidated tree. So it kind of metaphor. And then it was kind of spearing through and a little bit graphic, but kind of a graphic image of a cow, a bovine. And that had a little bit of a cityscape on its kind of burdening its back. And those two elements, how we feed 8 billion people and how you create the energy for 8, 7, 9 billion people that's it. If we don't figure those two things out, I don't know that we'll be able to do it. I do believe that we have the smart young people. We have an incredible technological growth and advancement that we can do it. The question is, will we all want to, and will we do it in time? And that's, to me, the thing. And so art, can do good things. It can create movements. It can push people to think. And I like to believe that that's what its purpose has always been. Maybe I'll make a little impact on that, at least in my local community, or maybe sometime in the future, a bigger impact than that. But to me, anyone that has a voice should at least talk about it, have a conversation around it, about these things, because it's important, to my 5 and 7 year old, it's important to your daughter, your granddaughter, or, now high school age kids. So, I think art has always done that, right? It's always taken on the most important social dilemma or conflict or issues, or even kind of societal issues. And I'm not speaking anything new there, but I think that's why we see so much artwork talking about these things, and certainly seeing how the environmental impacts are also becoming, kind of social justice issues as well, and social kind of issues overall around the world.
Well said. So obviously all this plays into your artwork, these thoughts that you have, the philosophy behind all these ideas. And where does this whole journey start for you with art?
So it's maybe like two different kind of plateaus of that question. I could say the journey physically of how I get into this, particular, we talked a little bit that earlier. Art itself, if I back up a little bit more, is more about, there's a sentiment I've said often to a lot of the artists in here. Joey Curlin did an amazing talk for us after his solo show in Bridge, and his sentiment about what art means to the world and what it's really about was super valuable to me. And his talk was essentially, in my mind, kind of coalesced at, it's about human connection, right? It's about creating something that someone can turn to and feel or react. So this, whether you know the artist or not, whether you even talk, sometimes you will, but it changes someone's heart or mind, or makes them feel or think something. And there's a human connection there. And I say that because I start simply at this, and I tell people all the time, I make art for the same reason I did when I was 5 years old. I liked making shit, and I like giving it to people. I like seeing their face light up, because I created something in the world that didn't exist. And here it was a way to connect with people and make them happy. And that made me happy. And I essentially make work for the same reason today. I mean, of course, we just heard me talk ad nauseam about the political ramifications and the things I cared deeply about, but it's still, in essence, the same thing. I love to make things that can affect people and that can make them moved in some way. And to me, there is nothing more human than that, and nothing more valuable than to use the gifts you've been giving than that, right? Because you use it for human connection. And so I like to boil it down to me being 5 years old and wanting to make a great drawing for my mom or my uncle or my aunt. And I see it in my kids right now. It's like the quintessential thing. And it is the same reason that we do it today. I think for most artists, they would say that there's that emotion inside of them. So the process to me starts there, right? It's this want to affect people in the world and make some sort of emotional movement. I had a very weird kind of upbringing within art. We talked a little bit about this, kind of just joking around. And when you guys have come to the gallery, I wasn't good at the school part of school. I think I was semi-undiagnosed. I know now with kind of dyslexia and that kind of stuff. but I struggled in reading and writing. I couldn't read really much at all until third grade, which is obviously put you behind in a lot of things. And so I tried to catch up. My mom switched me to the Catholic school, which really did help me and get a little bit more attention. But what I did have and I was still very, very worried. I was very scared. I knew that I wasn't the same as my peers and a lot of the other academic things. And so, but I did have this little ability to draw and to do things. And I had, I think, a little conceptual ability in that. And so I was lucky enough to have an incredible teacher, Mrs. Jepson, in grade school, who noticed that talent and did notice that in a few other people, and created a little biweekly environment where I get to have a special class about art. And I can say wholeheartedly that it changed my life, because I don't know that I would have gotten the confidence in other ways had I not had that thing that I was good at. So I give so many props to Mrs. Jepson. And I tell all art teachers that I meet, especially those that are grade school teachers, what you do is invaluable for those kids that have that talent. Because a lot of times they struggle in those other areas and they don't feel like they're the same part of society or have the same opportunity. And sometimes they're lagging behind. Of course, we know there's a lot that is not the case. But I feel the value was so wonderful for my life to have had someone that noticed that ability. And so then, I dabbled in art, did my own thing. Certainly through grade school was great. Picked up photography kind of at a young age, 35 millimeter, used to do a lot of black and white. Just a lot of it was nature. A lot of it was just random stuff. I thought even then, like 8th grade, which is probably the height of when I really carried camera around, I just thought there was something amazing about the idea that literally anything in the world could be made interesting with the right photographic eye and the right photographic angle. And to me, that was very, very compelling. It was like the most mundane of things, a wisp of hair off the side of a table, or a small little fuzz, on a sweater, or let alone, a beautiful vista. Anything could be made very beautiful with the right camera, the right angle, the right lens. And so I think that captured my imagination as far as conceptual art early on. The funny part about this is then I stayed on into Catholic school, and I went to a high school that was kind of struggling at the time and didn't have much of the arts at all. Matter of fact, they'd had none. And so I called myself a blank slate when I got to college, because I literally had no art classes for all 4 years of high school until I finally beat brother Bill. I went to Mullen High School, and actually my partner Michael Dowling did as well. And I loved the education I got. I thought it was amazing. But I said, we need art. And I beat him down for 3 years until finally my senior year, he had like one art class. But I actually saw that as opportunistic. I got my brain in the other academic places where it needed to be there. And so when I got to college, I had this kind of blank slate of art school and design. And I was really like a sponge and just took it all in. But it's a weird transition to have all this attention in kind of grade school up to 8th grade, and then have nothing for some of those formative years. And of course I did my own work, but it was, the academics was more the focus. But the good thing is that one little class really ballooned into something great, and they understood, not because of me, of course, but I think because of the overall idea. And now Mullen has a really good arts program. They have a whole arts building, and I'm proud that they did that, because I think the value that the arts bring is as valuable as a lot of the other kind of subject matter. But so that's kind of the early start. And then I actually went to the University of Kansas, which had a great design program and a great kind of pre-art program, mostly for the wrong reasons. I wanted to go out there with a bunch of buddies who had been out there the year before and party a little bit and that kind of stuff. But I loved the art program. I did not like being away from Colorado and that nature that we all were talking about earlier, the trees, the mountains, that stuff. So I lasted a semester out there, and then was lucky enough to come back and have DU accept me into the BFA graphic design program and the art program there, and got a well-rounded education at DU, and really loved all of my professors and all of my adjuncts at DU, who really I think kind of gave me a really great balance in art. And that's really where it all starts for me, is there, just kind of learning how to draw, learning how to use camera, learning the principles of design and certainly the principles of art. And then forcing them all together. But I still had that kind of, I don't know, maybe it's the kind of Catholic conservative upbringing of like, God, I need to get a job. I can't be a starving artist. So, and maybe a little bit of, I just wanted to be my own man and not have to worry about anyone else, providing for me on any level. So instead of kind of going the art route, I pushed into I was passionate about at the time, which was graphic design and art direction. So though I was always doing art, I was always creating for family and friends and myself. I was always dabbling in different things, materials, plastics and transfer and paper and photography and, some paint here and there. I was just doing that on the side because most of my creative energy happened in advertising. And I worked for a retail marketing agency called the Integer Group for a long, long time. I worked for a couple other agencies, Thomas and Perkins, and freelanced here and there. And I really kind of honed my craft as a kind of conceptual thinker in advertising, and then understood the kind of the principles of my own kind of idea of art in that world. And what it did and what influences my work today is it's very graphic. My work is graphic, it's photography based, photo illustration, that kind of stuff. But I use the same principles I had then, which is quick storytelling, right? Like being able to take elements and put them together to tell a story very, very quickly. You only have a few seconds in that environment. As someone that's caring about capturing someone's attention about environmental art, I have those same few seconds. And then similarly, I learned about type design and font and how these things create narrative together and how you can use those to create a greater thought or greater purpose. And of course, my work takes on a lot of those things as well. And I use a lot of quotes, historic quotes. Sometimes I write as a secondary narrative along with the graphic narrative of my work. So I tell people all the time, like my work, it would not have ended anywhere near where it was. I would have been a photographer or like an oil pastel kind of artist if I hadn't really settled into design and been part of the advertising world for 17 years.
Everybody we talk to does this thing differently, right? This thing called an art life. So it's cool to hear about your experience working for ad agencies and the work that you did and what skill set it gave you, and it's all important stuff that plays into your art today. It all helps build on each other. And, having a good design background, I think is really, really important. A lot of people don't get the whole design thing. There's a lot of bad design out there.
That's true. That's true. Well, but yes. And I think that's where the idea of, and I think this is true for all arts, for all, pretty much anything you are passionate about, whether it be fair, like law, landscape design, art, or even all sorts of different professions. If you're passionate about it, do it and find out the base principles of that work, of that discipline. And then you can start to break those things down. You can walk away from them and decide to not use them, but to get a great discipline of the basics first is, I think, important. So I think that's good with art too, certainly with kind of color theory and typography and just base principles of kind of layout and design. So, but yeah, it's fun to be able to break them. And it's interesting how it's transpired into where I'm at now. I mean, what happened to me was, and I think it's people will probably get a sense of that even listening, is that, oh, wow, this advertising thing, which is all about consumerism, you were doing for 17 years, but yet all that you care about now is about kind of the opposite of that, which is environmentalism and the things that are less about purchase and more about reuse and the things. And that's exactly what happened to me. I loved what I did. I actually worked on beer in the advertising world for a long time, and it's actually still a passion of mine, and it's actually led to some really cool things as well. But so I had fun in it for the first 5-10 years. I was a 23-year-old guy working on beer clients. We just had fun. We were drinking beer. I was drinking beer. It was just good times. I learned a lot about that. I think it was later on when I was doing more kind of associate creative directing and had the chance to creative direct and then manage people. And then also just started working on other brands that, were certainly really important, for a lot of different reasons, in the world, but they didn't feel as valuable to me. They felt like consumer products that I was just pushing. And I realized that my sentiments of who I was and what I cared about had really shifted, and that the fun of beer or even the fun of solving the problem that I love to do, solving the creative problem, was not enough. And it was making me feel like I was contributing to something that I didn't really want to be contributing to. Again, I put no fault in anyone that does that. It's a great industry for many reasons. But for me, I started planning my escape about, my mid-30s, because I knew that it was in conflict with a lot of the things that I cared about. And so that's really when I started art more full-time or professionally. I shouldn't say full-time. I started my own kind of little art company. We talked about it, Matarazzo Vintage Original. And I played in a lot of places. I played in fashion a little bit, did clothing stuff, transfer. I played with furniture and paint and graphic and interesting stuff. I wanted to repurpose. I wanted all of my things to be about reuse and finding a way into people's lives. And I had always used wood, and that's why I started with a lot of different parts and pieces of furniture and other things. And then I had always, done, my own kind of 2D pieces, but it all kind of coalesced together. And I started putting on my own shows. I was single, I had the money, and I had this massive force of like 800 marketers, young marketing people that love to go out and have a good time. And so I would find empty spaces as early as like 2005, 2006, 2007. I would just find an empty space and say, hey, let me do a show in here. And I would put all my own work in there, and I would ask a buddy to DJ, and then I would have like 300 young marketers in there, and I'd get some wine, and we just have a fun time, and I knew no one in the art community. I didn't even think about the art community really. And I was just this kind of like sovereign little weird universe of art. And I did that for a while until I met my wife, and then we decided to have kids. And there was this alternate universe, which is like, oh, I can actually do this art thing full time. I can be a dad, and I can do this art thing full time. And that's when it really changed. I started connecting more with the artists in the community. A good friend started Zeel, which is an amazing art group or art collective is the way we started. And it really changed my connectivity to the rest of the art world. And some of those are still some of my best friends in art. That's when Michael Dowling and I kind of reconnected after 20 years of high school, and he became a great mentor to me, and started connecting more within the greater art scene. And the art kind of purpose of art in Denver was kind of later on, really only the last 10 years, maybe even 7. And it really changed what I wanted to do, also what I cared about. And part of that was wrapped up in neighborhood and community and what we're doing now. But the idea of understanding how much art was important to community, understanding how much we were losing a lot of that in Denver as the growth had happened, and really then shaped a lot of what I was doing, and then probably shapes a lot of the journey that we've had since then. Yeah, it's been your point earlier was like not a straight line for sure.
You know what? It never is. So it's always interesting to hear how people, come to this point where they're at, where they're making work, where they're getting recognized, where they have a community that are thriving in. And it sounds like what you did. You found your people, right? Like you were kind of this lone wolf doing it. And then you found a community of people that you really related to that were artists and that, have pushed you and I'm sure you've pushed them. I mean, it's reciprocal. It's symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think in the end, the relationships in the community is like the biggest and best part of it. And I think most importantly, what was necessary for me was to get back into that kind of environment that I was kind of like kicked out of, I kicked myself out of, right? Which is that kind of, around artists, kind of learning from each other, kind of the art school mentality. Certainly that was the case within the ad industry, but I had kind of had this different experience. But that is the most important part of it is I've just learned so much from so many of the people that I've had the pleasure to be around, the artists that I now kind of work with a lot, and the people that kind of got me moving. And that community is what certainly gets me excited. Certainly what's, probably the impetus for the last, year and a half, and the things we've been doing to get art in the world for after COVID, and kind of, I think how Michael Dowling and I come to want to open this place, Bridge Project, even the idea of the name Bridge, right? Like it's about location. We're literally under the Highlands Bridge, but it was a concept that was important to us and to me, which is we wanted to bridge, the community, the artists, the galleries, and the private sector together to do something to bring art back, into a lot of these neighborhoods that have just experienced so much growth and so much, movement that it's really, kind of made it hard for the artists to be able to survive here and financially. So that bridging those things together, bridging the community together, doing something for community has been a big part of kind of where I've ended up. To me, art should be accessible. It should be amazing conceptually. It should be amazing contemporarily, but I love the fact that all people should be able to connect with and have access to really well done contemporary art in their communities, in their neighborhoods. Not that, places like the MCA or the Denver Art Museum are not that to community, because they are. But I think it's important that it's granular, that it's the people within your own community, that it's partly of your neighborhood, that there's the conversations can be about your neighborhood, about your city as well. So that's the next part of that journey. I mean, my work is still about environmentalism, and I still care deeply about that. But now I realize how much, to a certain degree, it's an oxymoron, but how much I care about the community as part of that, and care about perpetuating that. I think that's one of the things that Michael and I both care about.
Well, I think that goes hand in hand, though. I mean, we're a social animal, so we live in communities. So, and we have to care about our space and the larger scale. So I don't necessarily look at it as an oxymoron. I think that's pretty well related. But I really like to hear the impetus of the Bridge Project. How did that all came about, and how did you get the space, and what does that space represent, for the art community?
Yeah, I mean, I'll back up a little bit. I mean, I grew up here in Colorado, went to school at DU, like I said. In 1996, when I graduated, Denver was a changing place. Baseball and beer had just started in lower downtown, and it really started changing the nature of this as a city, and growth started. And I was so excited about it. And I was an artist in a city that had very little, kind of downtown at all. There was one place you could go. You go to Larimer Street and a couple other spots. We all laugh about some of these spots. Half of them I forget. It was not a place where you went and like felt the gravity of it all, and the roughness and the fun. It was like a lot of people left and, came in and left. And certainly my experience is different than a lot of others and other groups in other parts of the city. But I was this suburban kid who didn't experience it that way. So I was excited when this growth was happening. I bring it up simply because it exploded, and that explosion was great. But I got in quickly to a little neighborhood just because I had a chance. I made a little bit of money freelancing, and I was like, I got to buy this house because, I got into this North Denver neighborhood, at 26, and I was a bit of a gentrifier. I realize now, I didn't really realize at the time, but what it did is it really made me compassionate, but also passionate about the neighborhood thing. And so I bring that all up again because over the course of the last, say, 15 years, and you've seen just the exponential growth that this city's seen, which is great on so many levels. And I fault no one for wanting to move here, but it is such a difficult thing as environmentalists, but also as someone who cares about a city that is very much so different than it was. Percentage of people that are even from here is so different, that I wanted to preserve some of that. And so when I saw we had Navajo Street, just a couple of blocks from where I was for the last 21 years, and over the last 5-6 years, whatever it's been, as the money has just gotten so big and the values have gotten so high, the artists, we just can't survive. And so you've seen the Bug Theater generally fall away. You've seen, Pirate generally move and have to move. You've seen Edge and all these others. And so all of a sudden there wasn't any art. I mean, I shouldn't say none, but there was really no galleries left. And, you could find a great spot up on Tennyson potentially that was, holding on, or some little pockets here and there of pop-up things. But I was just adamant, man, how can you have one of the greatest neighborhoods in Denver, or the great food scene and amazing kind of, at least the start of some really good architecture and this community kind of feel. And you've got Paul Tamburillo, doing cool things to bring Little Man ice cream in a community spot. And you've got Rob Hahn doing like Avanti and kind of creating, repurposed ideals, but also bringing people together in unique ways and doing it in a responsible way. But where's the art, And so I guess I was kind of on a crusade. And that's right when I was meeting Michael and we were reconnecting, and I was getting these sensibilities from him. It's right when we were doing Zeel and creating these great opportunities, in different parts and doing pop-ups and other things. And I was just pounding on every door saying, like, look at, how can we do this? Like, we don't have the money. We obviously don't have the seat at the table because we don't have a bunch of cash, but we have this thing called art that is a community builder, right? We always connect. We give you value in the fact that we expand the conversation. We talk about those social issues. We make those things that are important, happen, and or at least have something valuable to chew on. And a lot of people listened. I mean, both Rob and Paul Temple were very interested and was working with them on different ideas and always slinging stuff at them. But I was constantly always looking for, where's that empty space that I've seen empty for a while, and how can I get in and talk to them about it, right? So that's kind of been my role, I guess you'd say, in the last 4 or 5 years of, I guess, for the art community, which is to keep pounding the table for getting us opportunities in an otherwise really expensive place where we've been having to be pushed to the periphery, right, where we can afford it. And though that's not bad, I love, West Colfax and what's going on over there. They're doing amazing things. I also think it's important to keep art in the other neighborhoods and find a way to do it in a very, inclusive and incredible way. So how does Bridge start? Really, it starts before COVID because, some other artists, including Michael was one of them, were doing some similar things over at Dairy Block, kind of right at the beginning of 2020. And some property groups over there were lending space to artists over there. And they were taking percentage of art, but they realized that, okay, there's this little thing we could do where we give it to them, let them perpetuate, let the galleries come in and do this thing. And it really worked. And that's where Michael did his True West show right before COVID hit. And we had already been, popping up and doing other stuff. But then I was like, oh, here's this thing, Michael. Like, here's this thing where we have found a sweet spot where we get all the artists that have connections to the galleries. We bring those galleries along with us and give them opportunity too, right? Because they want to do some different things. They want to bust out. And the artists themselves are excited to drive these things. If we can find the right partners that understand these empty spaces aren't making them money, maybe even, who knows, maybe it's a tax write-off to give it to us. Whatever we can do, this is how we talk about it. We're going to constantly rotate really interesting things. And we're going to do unique things to bring art back in the community. Well, of course, then COVID hits. And I'd already been sending out I've been sending it out for years, but changed, right? This little document that was like, here's what we're doing. Like, here's how we're going to bring, a really valuable situation. It may not be money, but here's what we're doing. And then COVID hits. And then that whole situation of Dairy Block kind of stopped, right? And all these great shows, Andy the Camp and Michael had one. And I know Scott Young had some, and there was a bunch of great artists that were doing stuff. And it all just kind of stopped. And of course, you all know, and I'm sure you've talked about it a lot over the last year, the big shift at that point was, oh shit, how do we get art in the world? How do we get art in the world? How do we get artists who live on this and are now like stopped in their tracks? Of course, this was everybody, but how do we get art in the world? And man, as a collective, we were trying to figure it out. As an individual, I was like just sick with it, trying to figure it out. And I would run the neighborhood. And I realized across the street from the space we're in now was this brand new building, Circuit Building, owned by Wynkoop Properties, who's been our partner now for a while. And I won't digress too much, and I'd already had a little relationship because we had done some shows, one show here, and it had a little relationship with them. They were cool. But I called them, I said, look, we can't get art in the world. You have these amazing windows that are facing out into the world. Let me put a show in there. Let our collective put a show in there. We're going to put it out facing, and you can be as safe as possible. And that's what we did. So our collective had concepted a show actually before COVID, but it totally worked with COVID, which is the space between. And then my wife was a psychologist, and we really understood as a group that the mental difficulties that people were having with quarantine and just the overall sense of loss in the world was huge, let alone the physical loss of COVID. And so we partnered with Mental Health Center of Denver and created a show that they let us put in there at a drop of a hat. They said, get in there. Like, don't worry about it. So I'm going to be there for 2 days. Just putting art up, and then we won't be in there. It's like, don't worry about it. Just do it. Like, they didn't say lease. They didn't say insurance. They said go. And so for 6 months after that was May, we had concepted earlier than that, but I just didn't think it was the right time. I thought we should close down, but then I was like, we got to get this out there. So we built it. And then in May, like the first week of May was the show. And what it did was reinforce all the things that I wanted to do. We shifted gears, but it reinforced everything. It created community. People loved and were so passionate and so accepting and so excited about seeing art every day, walking around when they had not had a chance to do these things. And we all know digital's okay, but it's just not, it's just not the same cup of tea. And so we created this thing, and they let us keep creating for 6 months. We did that. And as we did that, and as we saw the boundaries starting to open up a little bit, end of last summer, and into, I should say that a little bit, and of course it came back, but Michael and I said, hey, let's figure this out. And this space that we were in, Bridge Project, was still empty. And they had a little group in here that was helping when they redid the plaza here. But other than that, the space had been empty for like basically on and off for like 4 years. And it's just too gorgeous. And they understood that too. And there has a few frailties as far as like not being on the street, maybe a little close to the highway. But we said, can we do it? We gave them the presentation. Here's what we want to do. And they loved what we had done with the window gallery, and they trusted us from what we did there. They trusted us from the show we had done in 2018 in here as a collective. And the conversation was still open. The space was still open. Obviously, retail was in this weird, like, we don't know what the hell is going to happen space. And that's, I will say, one of the things that we talked about, and I continue to talk about, was this is our chance. We finally have a semi, not equal, but we have a better shot at the table, right? Because all of a sudden they're going to have a hard time keeping people in these spaces. We know it all happened with, the bigger company kind of exodus from a lot of space, commercial space. And so I thought it was our chance to have a seat at the table too. And I think it was, they also trusted us. And I think that was the main thing. And so we just went for it. And Michael and I we had a lot of people that were on that kind of same ideal and shit, but we realized early on that let's just do this as a tandem right now and figure out, is it going to work, and keep it small and see if we can afford, what at that point was the real relationship, which was, they said yes. We said, let's do this for 6 months and then see how it goes. Both of us just trying to check it out. We had to get the space up and running. We had most of the electric to have to do. That was kind of our initial cost. And then we did sign a lease, even though Unico just said, we are not in the business of taking money for artists right now. We are going to give you this space as an open lease, free of charge, to perpetuate the art. So that was the most amazing part, is that we have a 4,000 square foot, amazing Chelsea-like gallery, brick walls and gorgeous beams and all this stuff. And it has been an absolute gift from a property group, let's be fair, has struggled like everybody else through COVID, with tenants and everything else. And so much value in that, and so appreciative of that. But of course, we did it by the book. So we signed a lease. They have some pretty stringent kind of ideals and positions, put in place. So we had to get our insurance kind of wrapped away. We try to keep it as simple as possible. And so Michael and I, recurring cost in here, because we really wanted to make it happen. And the goal was just to bring art back and bring contemporary ideas back. And like I said, connect with the community and bring a space for artists and all arts that people could use. And so many people had done nothing, or had so little chance, or had so many of their shows canceled. For us, it was like, okay, let's get out there. Let's get this space open so people can do work. And of course, we did that in the middle of January. So it was weird and it was hard, and it was only 35 people at a time. And we would do shows where we would spread the opening over 3 days, just so we feel like we could get enough people, those first 2 months. But that's how it was. That's how it came to pass. And I think right now, I'm proud of the fact that I've been persistent and pounding on doors and asking. My mom was the one that taught me, like, you're never going to get a yes if you don't ask. You know what I mean? So just do it. And my mom was like that. She would just get stuff done. She would just like, let's just do it. Let's get it done. So I guess I took a little bit after that, but I'm very proud of that persistence. But what I'm really proud of is the community that we built here, the artists that have made it possible. We've had so much help and so much value from so many people, a lot of which have been on your podcast. And then, of course, Michael being an incredible mentor. But like I said, mostly it's having a partner like Unico who understands that, though I'm sure this space is worth a really pretty penny, in the open market for rent, they understand that that's not what it's all about all the time. And sometimes it's about creating community where maybe it's been a tad bit lost, and maybe that thing creates as much value, both monetarily long-term as it does in sentiment and community. And so I think that's where we're at. And now we're excited because they're excited. We're in negotiation with them to maybe try to keep the space longer. We've got some really good ideas to actually generate some funds for them both and their investors. And then, Michael and I are still think less about, I think, personal finance in this and more about just making it happen. Like, it'd be nice not to lose money on it, but what's still nice for us is to keep the artists kind of in charge of that. Meaning, we're not taking 50 or 60%. We're not asking, that kind of financial structure in the term. What we're really doing is asking, great work and flexibility of, getting in quick and that kind of stuff, and trying to just give access to as many versions of the contemporary arts as we can. And so I hope it comes off. We're super passionate about it. And it's been a life dream, certainly in the last 10 years to do something like this. And we're just bump along, see if we can make it work. I will say, I know you both have seen some of the shows, and this past Friday was, like, as you mentioned, this kind of opening. It felt like the first Friday and kind of art back in the universe. And we were nothing short of that. I mean, I keep telling people, like, man, we had Sarah Bowling, like you mentioned, and Rule Gallery kind of lending us her and being part of promoting, which is an amazing, again, kind of collaborative effort. We had Ramel, who's just an amazing up and coming artist and is doing such great things, amazing following as well, experimenting with great color. Movement form, abstract, but even playing with some neon. And she brought an incredible amount of energy to the table, and certainly a lot of people. And then, a great group of women in Intervisions Collective who have really, over the last 3 years, I've just struck up a relationship and just had a really good time learning from them. And I would say their experience as an all-female Black and brown art collective in Denver, and how that differs from a lot of the other kind of experiences I've had, and really wanted to just get out of the way and put whatever voice they wanted in this gallery, along with these other two very strong female voices. So it's, a month of all female artists. We couldn't be more happy with what that meant. 3 communities were in here, and there was, at points it felt like there was 1,000 people in here. It was crazy. And it felt both a little trepidatious, but at the same time, it felt real, and it felt okay. And, we were still within guidelines. And we asked every artist, like, if you want to do mass, we're doing mass. If any of you aren't comfortable, we will say it's a masked environment. But everyone said we will figure it out on our own. And people wore masks that wanted to, and people didn't that didn't. And it felt like you mentioned, that real, back to something that was real for a first Friday for the first time in a long time. But man, it was pretty awesome to feel. It felt like, I know it's not a culmination, but it felt like it was like we finally got there. You know what I mean?
I got a follow-up question about the bridge project. Could we do that same project in other cities? Is that model what's the word?
Replicatable. Yeah.
Replicated. Thank you.
My argument is that I doubt we were doing it. I doubt we were. This is not even necessarily groundbreaking per se, but I guess the point is that it was for us at this time and in Denver, and how we were working with it within the construct of what Denver is, right? The money and the growth and all this other stuff. So yeah, we talked about it. Many of the other artists and other people from New York to Chicago and others, there's lots of great versions of this through the decades and just overall. But is it replicatable? Absolutely. And the most important part of that is understanding that when there is empty space, there is always a value for the arts, because it will bring eyeballs to it. I'll give you a perfect example of that. So the window gallery, we'll go back to what kind of started the first half of this kind of journey. That was a 5,000 square foot space of windows, literally on one of the most trafficked pedestrian corners, right on the 16, kind of walk over the Highlands Bridge, like thousands of people a day. And that circuit building is only 3 years old. And they were having a hard time renting that space. Certainly, of course, before, but it had been 3 years that was an empty space. In one of those years really ended up being COVID. But we're in there for less than 6 months. And I like to think the energy and the thought process and the excitement and the eyeballs that we brought to it was part of this. And now they're renting half of that space to a restaurant concept that's going to be right across the street from where we are now. I like to think that Modus, who took over where Colton Gray is, saw that energy and saw that another restaurant was going in, and that they were excited about this space. And that there was, the first day they came in and said, we want to partner with you. What are you guys doing? Let's have fun. Carbon across the way has been an incredible partner. Carbon is a bar and coffee shop, Habit Donuts as well. They've been an incredible partner. Like, my point is the model is that when you put eyeballs on it, you put energy, and when you bring the creative back, that the social structure and the community feels that and wants to be around it. The positive energy we had from that, let alone whether people were congregating for a party, they still saw that work in those windows and said, this is me, this is our community. We got sales out of there. And so it's replicatable in that. Let's not always let the dollars and cents drive what is the value of a space to the community. And then eventually that dollars and cents comes back. I think that's the baseline. And that's kind of how we've pitched it, right? Is that we will help you get there knowing the space has been empty. And I think that is replicatable without question. And I think really a lot, I'm sure quite a few have done that. And it's probably not necessarily new, but I think, again, in these cities like Denver, which have just grown so quickly, it's hard to know where it's going to go next. I think it's been a real valuable asset. So,
yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think what you guys done is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. I will say, look, at what makes me the most happy is the artists and giving them the opportunity and the light up of like getting that opportunity. And more importantly, and this is what I think COVID also hurt, is like, we've got people congregating in here. We've got a community of artists that are we're learning from each other. Again, it's a lot like the shared space thing. And we know that's not new, but that's what's been fun. And then, it's weird, but I've said, like, you can't have this vacuum of art. Like, there's so much wonderful, so many beautiful buildings and so many people that have housing and like $1 million condos and all this other stuff. And guess what? We've got like groupies, man. We got people that like come down. They've now like helped us put art up. Like they're not artists, but they love being here. They love the energy we've created. We've got people that constantly now check like, what's the next thing? They know that we're trying to activate the space and find uniqueness out of whatever. Like, our good friend Tess, the local dancer, and Eric Anderson and his solo show last month, where they met, they started collaborating right then and there on this dance kind of art collaboration in the middle of the gallery. Like, we're doing unique things that bring energy. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that we are bringing a community together and people really care about it. And that's the whole goal. And it's around contemporary art, which I believe is important for solving some of those problems that we talked about earlier.
New Magazine is our media sponsor for the Tenant Podcast. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. Look to New for compelling stories from the world of art and fashion. Thanks for listening. I was thinking about you guys today and just how phenomenal that space is, and how much I look forward to coming down and seeing the newest show that you guys are putting on. And I was thinking it in terms of, I mean, Bridge is such an appropriate name in so many ways, but you really bridge the city. Bridge is like the glue. If you want to see art, you got to go over the Platte, right, into downtown.
Yeah.
Or you got to go up in the Highlands. And for people that don't know or not familiar with Colorado or Denver, there's a major highway that splits the city, I-25. And Bridge is really the only art gallery in that area. And the stuff that you're doing with it, as far as the quality of work, the quality of art, everything from dance and the music stuff that you've been bringing in too, the variety, there's nothing like it. I think it's just spectacular, man. You should be proud.
Thank you. And I think, I would say I marvel at Michael Dowling, my partner's ability to really connect with so many parts of the contemporary art community and just the community at whole here. I am just, like I said before, a version of my mom would just like ask people and let's do it, And so when I feel like, oh man, well, I think when I realized that the 2D and the painters and the sculptors, and like they were missing out, but they had chances here and there to show their work. The musicians and the dancers have been like just out, you know what I mean? And we know that digital's okay in that, but that is not seeing a show at the Bluebird. That is not, going down and seeing, something at DCPA, or let alone, seeing Wonderbound or others perform in their space. It's not the same. And so when we realized that, I really, not that I took a sharp turn, but I was like, we knew we wanted all that in here, but I started really kind of concentrating on that. And Michael and I really had a lot of conversation around it. So for me, it's also what builds a wider community of what we consider art. And that's why it's Bridge Project. It's not Bridge Gallery. And we were adamant about that because it's about all contemporary arts. And I think it's about, being accessible, but I really appreciate it. I mean, in the end, we have the MCA down the way, which is an amazing, contemporary art museum. We've done amazing things for Denver, and they actually do a lot of local. A lot of the shows they have right now are just finishing. I mean, Rick Griffith is in there. He was one of my professors, my typography professors. A lot of local there too, but there's something about, like I said earlier, granular, a little bit more artist driven, a little bit more like off the cuff, and something that just feels like it's community. And I think you're right. There really isn't much like that right now in these neighborhoods. And I hope to think that that's not going to be the case for long. When COVID comes, it really pushes the sentiment of what humanity is, right? Like, what is it to be human when all of a sudden the social nature of humanity is cut away? And I think a big part of what happens in that is that you turn to the things that invariably make us different than just these beings that are trying to feed and eat and procreate and be done, right? We have this love of art, which makes us invariably this compelling creature. And when COVID happens and the sociability goes, you realize how much we depend on art, music and dance and movies, the painting and the interaction of those things to fill our lives in incredible ways, right? And when those things went away, I like to think that the satiability of it all, like after that started to wane a little bit and COVID started to go away, you can see how much people are so excited about the arts. They know what they were missing. They know, I mean, we've talked about it, like people were buying art even through COVID from the window gallery and otherwise. Why? Because they realized they now weren't out into the world where the art of the world and the sentiment of the shows at Red Rocks and the DCPA and going to the galleries wasn't there anymore. They didn't get that. Now they had to bring it to their homes. They needed to replace that emotion. They needed to bring some of that personally home. So we talked a lot as artists, if we can get it out there, we really felt like people wanted to buy too, which is a benefit for us. But I really believe there will be not that it was gone, but I think there will be an incredible desire and even more push desire to really respect and pay for and appreciate the arts after this COVID thing, because I think what makes us invariably human. And it's what's worth a lot of times what's living for, like these creative things that we do, i.e. a podcast and things that bring knowledge and interest to the world. So I don't know if you've sat with Forge yet or not, if he's done your podcast.
We haven't talked to him on the podcast, but he's held court many times and I've sat with him and chatted with him. And that guy is just so full of phenomenal ideas.
Energy and ideas. I bring him up because I keep quoting him, and I don't know, maybe somebody else said it, but he's the first one I heard it from. And it was early on. He said, "Hey, what are you doing during the Coronaissance?" And I thought that was brilliant, right? Like, just like any other kind of mass movement in humanity, it comes because of something else, right? And artists across the world had to shift how they worked, how they thought, how they were going to be art to the world, how they were going to bring music, hell, probably even podcasts had to change. Like in the end, it was a renaissance, having to be a renaissance, but the Coronaissance I thought was a brilliant play, right? Because we all had to change. And I think it was tongue in cheek, but it was kind of brilliant. And so I bring it up because I think it represents a little bit of what I was just talking about this idea that art has this, I think, newer value, out of something so kind of emotionally and kind of creatively devastating as coronavirus.
It's interesting. This is we're 83 episodes in. To a T, everyone that we talked to this past year during the pandemic, every artist either had one of their best years or their best year ever selling art. And it was really interesting to hear that, It
is weird.
We would ask that question almost every week. We kind of stopped now that we're kind of seeing it in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
But we'd ask that of every single artist, and every single one of them would say, you know what, this has actually been one of my best years ever. I sold so much art this year.
And one of the artists I seen at the Doll this weekend, when she was giving her little talk at the opening, she said, "I feel really guilty about this, but the virus was one of the best things that's ever happened to me as far as my art business." So I mean, but she felt guilty about it, which I totally understand. But
yeah. I mean, look at in the end, I think what's interesting about that is all things are true. Like when I said earlier, we're trying to get this window gallery up so that we can get art into the world. Like it was true. Ray Rinaldi did a review in the Denver. Well, I think it was part of the Denver Post, but in that same weekend, like five of us were all trying something different. Like Art Collective was doing this. Michael Dowling and Leon were doing his residency in window, and he was trying something else. What was the little kind of art store and unique art place? Oh God, I'm so bad with the name. They were doing this amazing online, almost like infomercial art, thing with like 20, 30 artists around the country. And it was like a must-see kind of digital TV. And I think K Contemporary was renting a truck, and plastering, renting an ad truck and putting art on it and driving around Boulder just to get art into the world. Like, yeah, we were all trying shit. You know what I mean? And like Ray said, it's never like bumping elbows and drinking a glass of wine and spilling it on yourself and like being near art and just like getting to talk to people and see it up close. But damn it, it's still made a dent in it. And I would think, so that was real. But I also think as people figured out a little bit of the online thing, as they realized, like I said, that they could only see that same damn picture that they've had in their house for the last 10 years that they've been meaning to replace, so many times on a Zoom and this, that, and the other. Listen, I had an artist told me, a good friend, Anthony Grant, he said his daughter had a piece of his behind her and she worked for some kind of big media company. And he got more sales because the art was behind her on Zoom all the time than he had ever gotten, digitally otherwise. I'm like, this is what I'm saying. Like all this new, so it makes sense, no, she shouldn't feel guilty. I think in the end, we all had to make ends meet. And I do think art was one of the things that helped the emotional psyche in so many different ways of society at loss. And so I think, as much as, we all know a lot of people prospered during this, I think art would be the least of the ones I would worry about having prospered from it, Yeah. But it's an amazing thing. And I do think it creates a whole new value for what these creative kind of endeavors, these minds, this art, it means to society. And I think it's never not meant a lot. I just think it means even that much more,
Yeah. Go into that whole idea of seeing art behind you. I watched the news or whatever, and they've been doing a lot of Zooms from people's homes. And it's always amazing to see what art different people have behind them. And it's just crazy because I'll be noticing their art. Probably part of it is because of the podcast, but I'll be like, oh my God, I like that piece behind them. Or whatever, Well,
it's super interesting because it's become almost like this is the part of the coronavirus. Like things changed overnight. And it's like all of a sudden, like your car was, or your clothes, as say an anchor person or even just anyone that was public figure, all of a sudden, like what your home / what you portrayed behind you, most of it was like, how many books can I put out there? How much of the knowledge can look like I've had. I love the people that just like swore the whole thing off and put like Gumby or other shit behind there. But I thought it was great because it was this whole new kind of societal, kind of shift of like not class, but almost like, who am I and what are the cues behind me? It was like a time capsule of like where you've been, who you are and what you're about. And then of course, if you didn't put a picture of you and your significant other up there, you were probably in shit creek, sorry if I can say that. And then, it's just funny. Like all these things are kind of like the stereotypes now of like, what do you have to have behind your Zoom if you're, so, but of course it's just all new society when it comes to these things. And hopefully we'll forget it all. I mean, not all of it, but a good proportion of it. And we can get back to we'll call it whatever normal human life is. Right.
Right.
Without taking it for granted.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, absolutely. Without getting away from art, I will say, I mean, I guess it gets, I don't know if it gets political, but it just gets kind of more sentimental. I believe the history books will show two very different experiences when it came to COVID. And I think it's going to be at odds with itself. And I think it'll depend on who you were, what job you had, and also whether you had loss or not. And I think we've all experienced this. Maybe we all feel that way. I felt very lucky as an artist who could have really struggled. My wife does well, and we didn't feel that struggle. A lot of my siblings did not get that chance. Certainly a lot of other people, I'm sure you all know. But then there's also the loss part of it, right? And we all know someone that's probably lost somebody. But, I bring up my good friends, Tracy and Sean, and, she had 3 family members in the same ICU, her dad, her mom, and her grandmother, all, past 70, and only 2 came out. And I think the people forget, especially those that I think didn't have real loss during this, either financially or physically when it comes to loved ones, that's super real. You know what I mean? Like half the world is going to have an experience like that. And the other half is maybe put money away and just thought it was all like just a nuisance, and I contemplate that a lot. I think there's probably artwork in a show in there somewhere. We're working on something that's hopefully some version of honoring, maybe bringing some ideas together, but for the space here. But it's just, I still get struck of the humanity of it, or I guess maybe in the lack of it, in that it's almost like 2 different worlds will exist depending on who you were. And I think it's going to be real interesting to hear and see what that looks like kind of historically, when this all comes to pass in literature, in the history books. I think it'll be really interesting to see how that went,
For sure. I think it's interesting, this journey that you've had as far as, and I want to ask you about this. And I think you alluded to your mom being definitely a catalyst for it. But I mean, in high school, you're the one that said, hey, we need an art class when there was no art classes. And now Mullen has a phenomenal art program for their students. And you taken off on your own, before you left advertising, starting to do these little pop-up shows where you could have them. And then pivoting to what you're doing now with Bridge, were you always industrious?
I don't know. I mean, I just, if you ask my family, I'm kind of like, I think I'm just I guess kind of an embodiment of my mom and my dad too. Don't get me wrong. My dad is an amazing man. He had a private practice for 45 years, mostly kind of underserved populations, Medicare, Medicaid, and is an amazing man in medicine and self-built, both of them, literally. You leave New York and go to Kirksville, Missouri to be a teacher in a teacher's college. And then you come out of there 6 years later out of Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, not having ever even really thought you were going to graduate school. They made something of themselves. And they did it in a way that was never stepping on the backs of other people. I think the baseline for me is I'm a super compassionate person, even though I'm a kind of a hot-blooded Italian generally. Like I definitely, you guys have never gotten to see it, but I definitely have that kind of Sicilian Italian blood in me. But I think it all relates back to being passionate about things and never really not being passionate about things. Sometimes that gets me in trouble. But when I really care about it, it is impossible for me to let it go and impossible for me to not make it important. And most of that centers around people I care about and the things that I care about. And most of the things I care about are related to people, related to, doing right by people and helping people for the most part. I will bring up, I am proud. My whole family in that regard, they all do this in some ways, but my mom was a driving force because, she had 5 kids. She had it all together. She didn't go to school, but then went back to school later. She's a great writer and essentially, a mom, but essentially just willed herself to do things. I mean, she ended up being a tennis coach because we ended up having a tennis court like right behind us, and she's like, well, it's there, I'm going to play. And then she ends up being a state championship tennis coach, right? Like, coaching for almost, 15, 17 years. And by the way, being the head coach of both the male and female team at Mullen, my old high school, back in the 90s when I don't even think people thought that way, let alone like it was happening. And it wasn't even a big deal. It was like, oh yeah, Vicky's the coach of both of those teams. Ended up winning state with my sister. And that was a big deal for her, kind of self-taught to a certain degree. But in the midst of that, she had answered a call for just a little ad if anyone wanted to volunteer for Special Olympics. And she's like, well, I can do that. I coach. And subsequently for 20 years, coached, maybe not quite 20, but became a coach for Colorado Special Olympics and was at one point the volunteer director of Colorado Special Olympics and is actually in the Colorado Special Olympics Hall of Fame. My mom passed away 4 years ago this November, and it's been a difficult time for my family. She was that Sicilian kind of rock in a very big Italian family. And I'd like to think that her heart and what she did and what she cared about and was always about just getting out there and getting it done and almost always about helping people to do it, is kind of what I've taken from the world and what I've taken from her and from my dad. But so, yeah, I mean, to be really, really fair, most of the time, I don't care about the glory. I certainly don't care about the money. I care that it helps people and I care that we're doing something valuable. And I think that's what drives, to your point, to say this industriousness. I just sometimes wish I was smarter at the business part of it, but in the end, I will do it anyway. I'll jump in. And I think that's what drives it. Just a passion for caring about people and the things that people are involved in,
It's definitely embedded in your DNA. I get that sense. And I had read that your mom had volunteered for Special Olympics for something like 20 years. I think that's amazing. And then as I'm Googling information about you, Brett, I see a picture of you as an election judge standing out in front of the Pepsi Center, taken by a good friend of mine, Dave Zalabowski. And I was like, that's cool. Right on.
I didn't even know that existed, man. I didn't know that existed.
I find all kinds of stuff out there on the internet.
That's so funny. Listen, I'm sure it's hard to not get into politics and stuff on this. All I can say is, if you are an environmentalist, this is one of the most important elections in the history of this American kind of population, right? This American experiment. So for me, I wasn't going to be sitting on the sidelines during that. I also said at the end of the last kind of election cycle that I would not be kind of like sitting on my ass again, and thinking things were going to happen that weren't. We were going to take an active approach. And so, Yeah, I like to think that we did everything we could to put the things that were important in my mind, humans, and then of course, taking care of those humans, and then the earth were important to me. And also, I'm fortunate that I can give that time, right? Like, I mean, during COVID, so when we started this process, started the gallery, was doing the window gallery, had started some other things. We had our eye on this, and this ended up happening that December. So we were already kind of in the mix, but I did not want to say that I didn't put every effort I could have in. And to me, it was very important to put my money where my mouth was and actually be part of that process. And I got to tell you, if anyone's listening to this, it was the greatest, like 4 days. Like I was we'll call it election judge, but really we helped people on all different levels to kind of like make sure that they understood how to vote, how to get registered, all those things, even up to the last minute. I mean, Colorado's that kind of state. So you can literally kind of vote up to the day. But it was great because all the negativity around the election and even the stuff I'd felt like melted away when we were together in that group. It was like so refreshing because you were doing this civic duty and it didn't matter who people were voting for. It really didn't. I mean, of course we all had but it was like, this is the most important thing. And so the baseline is the end of the election that night, we were all like, oh shit, I got to go back to feeling like now worrying about the election. Like we were just so happy to do our civic duty and our ability to help in whatever way we could. And it was like so helpful in the process of it all. Because man, as anyone knows on either side, how difficult the whole process had been for so many years. And it was just nice to have a reprieve from that. And it just felt so good. And that's why I told people, like, I'll do it every cycle if I can, you know what I mean? If I can physically do it, because it really makes you feel the process and feel like you're part of it and that you're really helping it. But yeah, man, that's funny. You saw that. That's pretty funny. Before that, you may have seen too, I mentioned Rick Griffith, as a professor of mine, an amazing kind of just steward of all things design and all things letterpress and all things just really cool in Denver. I had decided that, again, I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines, and I created this. I asked about 8 or 9, 10 designers that I thought were really great designers, less the art community, though there are a lot of them are artists, but it was more of a design discipline. And I worked with this group that's a friend of mine over at Artist Proof Collective. They're just a print house, and they do really cool stuff for artists. And actually, Cody Cooley, you mentioned earlier, a lot of his kind of G clays and stuff come through there too. But I have a friend over there, and I said, I want to do this thing. Will you help me print them? I said, we're going to do a Get Out the Vote kind of t-shirt thing where we're just going to like just push this online. We're going to do our thing. I'm going to get like 10 great artists, and they're all going to design really great Get Out the Vote shirts. And we're just going to promote this thing. We're going to see if we can sell them, and then we'll give a percentage. I don't even remember what it was. We gave like all of our percentage to sale to the local chapter of the NAACP. So anyway, so Rick, Sandra Fettingus, Holly Kai Hurd, myself, Forge, but we did this little like 1 month to the day of the election, we did this Get Out the Vote t-shirt thing. Again, same thing. It's like, it's a little movement, but I wasn't going to be sitting on the sidelines. You know what I mean? And I was like, let's do this. And so we had some great designs and had a little fun. The crew over at Central Market let us kind of take over the parking lot for a half minute that weekend. And we were just kind of doing our thing, and we were pushing, registration and stuff too. So yes, I mean, I think in the end, I think I did like 3 charities during COVID. I don't like that. We did another one for PPE, and we just, I guess that's the goal, is to help people. I don't know whether it's art or not,
I love that. And with that window gallery that you did, 50% of all the proceeds went to Mental Health Center of Denver, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. And they were a great partner. I got them through my wife. I mean, she knew some of the people over there, and, they did their due diligence. The baseline, I hate to say, on that particular show, we didn't have a lot of sales that early on because there were still not a lot of people out, but and after that we did, but it was still pretty locked down. But the main thing was we worked with them with language and created incredible posters that went along every other, like not every other window, but like every 5 blocks of windows. And those posters were all about mental health services that you could go to at, Mental Health Center of Denver. Like no one really knew that you could call up. You could even walk into some of these centers even then, if you needed, or if you felt like you had a dire situation, if you felt like you were going to harm yourself. And we gave great tips for things to watch out. So the better benefit for me, of course it would have been great to give him a bunch of money, but the better benefit, and a lot of that art was also very personal. It was kind of like reflective and, and so though we did have a couple of small purchases, I think Forge had one, and but it was more about empathy. It was about seeing that other people were feeling the same way as you, and saying, okay, it's okay to feel like mad or to feel really sad, or maybe even to feel like I'm not sure I'm okay, and then to fill that in with and to pay that off, I should say, with the ability to kind of give people some tools, as posters walking by or whatever. Because look at my family's no stranger to having, some, thoughts and needing, kind of help on the kind of mental health kind of, scale or whatever. But I know there's a lot of people that just have really gone their lives and really hadn't, needed a lot of that. But this thing put a pressure on everybody. And I kept saying that, like, even those that had never felt, the pressures of depression or these other things, or even, loss, that put pressure on people that had never felt those things before. And it was important to get knowledge to those people that really had no, like, maybe even understand what they were feeling. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, why am I totally a disaster? Or why am I feeling totally helpless or hopeless? So we were thinking a lot about that. And again, that comes a lot from my wife, who's an amazing person and a director at the VA, at the Mental Health Consortium there, and does a lot with kind of veterans in that regard too. But yeah, it was great. And then, of course, we wanted to do more in that regard, but I think they, the same way we were super appreciative of it. And we got some good media on that as well. I thought it was good. So yeah, but it was, it started it, and that was super cool. And we actually did a second round of that because we were like, oh, this COVID thing's still going, like that was May, it started going, and then all of a sudden it started kind of creeping back right in fall after that. And so we did a second iteration of it where we shifted a little bit. We shifted it, and it was just, I don't know, I guess, something valuable, I think, for the neighborhood.
For sure, man.
Yeah.
So how many shows have you put on thus far since you've started Bridge Project?
Oh God, let's see now. So we started with Michael's, I say Michael's, I helped him, but obviously we kind of constructed it together. But the second iteration of True West from 2020 in Wild Wild, that was a group show, and really has been our last full group show. And that took over all three spaces. Again, I think you mentioned it earlier. It's like 4,000 square foot of space that Unico has given us. And it essentially breaks down into kind of three halls, I call them gallery halls. But that was the first show, and it was all encompassing. I think we had somewhere in the range of 35, 40 artists from Denver in that show, and like 80 some pieces of art, maybe more. Really great show. I mean, I love that idea that Michael sparked a couple of years ago, and we'll continue that. And I think he'll continue that. He wants to branch out, maybe do it in other parts of the state, maybe even two. But we'll almost assuredly, if we have the space, continue that. And honestly, even if we don't have the space, we'll probably find a way. That was last week of January into February, all February. And then we had then essentially broken it into three spaces for each month after that. And so, I mean, what is that? So February, March, April, May, and now June, we've had 13 different, shows in here in six months, and I guess right now 5, but 6 months if you include June. And we've had, a bunch of great solos, Brett Fox, and we've had Andy DeCamp and Eric Anderson. We've had a wonderful artist, Daphne Sweet, out of Missoula, who was brought to us by Anthony Garcia of Alto Gallery, and he curated that space in that show. We did an amazing, we called it was kind of like our nod to the European kind of day of collage. We call it Month of Collage, but we had Joey Curlin as a solo show, which I mentioned earlier, of his amazing kind of take on art and just amazing brain overall, but certainly his work and his talk was amazing. And then a group show as well within that. Michael and I, in the meantime, had a collaborative show, which we really had a lot of fun with. I learned a lot and gave me a little boundary to do some stuff even outside of the limitations I give myself kind of environmentally. And we actually had that show up for a process show for a full month. And then just by the happenstance of size and the other stuff, we were able to keep that show up another month. And then, of course, we've had a couple of pop-ups in the meantime, too, I guess 13, 14, 15 shows, because we did We did have a great partnership with New Denver Magazine, which we let them take over, and a great young artist, Sammy, curated that whole show. And of course, Richard and his group over at New Denver did an amazing job of bringing really great life to this fashion and everything else. That was like a one weekend pop-up. It felt like a month. And then, of course, Michael Vacchiano, and I'm not sure if you've met or talked with him. Great influence on me. Great painter. Used to run Point Gallery back over in Santa Fe Art District for a while. He's been a great benefit to this space as well. But he had his construct, and it was about having some fun, man. Like sometimes you just have to like throw the seriousness away and have some fun. We did a 4-day pop-up Star Wars event art show, which had some amazing contemporary artists do amazing, fun contemporary Star Wars art. And man, I tell you, it reminded Michael and us that we can't be serious all the time, and that we have to bake in these kind of, weekend long, or every once in a while, like take a week, shorten a month show and do something that's just more accessible and playful and interesting, and allows for artists to also have a little bit different take. And so it reminded us that we had that mentality when we started it. And of course we went to this very kind of, I don't know, not typical, but at least, group of solo shows and kind of wonderful contemporary solo shows. And we need to have some fun and be playful and sometimes be a little irreverent in that way too. So, I mean, I guess that's, like 13, 14, 15 shows or so.
It's a lot of work, man.
That is.
It is a lot of work, dude, let me tell you. My wife would tell you that too. She would tell you it's a lot of work. But what? You know what, man? I mean, it is so amazing to see so many artists come through here and get so much from them and learn so much, and then also create such relationships. That's what's been amazing about. But yeah, and I tell people I know I've told you, Todd, we've been essentially, building the ship as we were sailing it, because, as most galleries get going, they like have a plan, they start, a year's worth of programming, they'll kind of get going on it. And of course, as a pop-up, and that's essentially what we were, we didn't have 5 shows in the can already conceptualized, because we were like, we got the space, great, let's go. And so we ran with the first one, and then we're basically programming as we went. We tried to get in front of it, but there was so much work to get those other programs going. And so now, as we've kind of been given our second 6 months, and it's not a total done deal, but they've said go, and then we'll figure this thing out together over the next few months and figure out how we're going to work it out. We get a little bit more of a chance to plan. We started doing that a little bit more. We didn't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Certainly didn't want to disappoint anyone if we didn't get that second kind of stint and this opportunity to grow longer, maybe a couple of year release. But at least we have a little bit more of a semblance of kind of where we want to go. So Michael and I, and I'm not going to tip too much of my hand, but we've got a good list of already almost full kind of programming through to December, with some movement and some thoughts. We've had a bunch of great artists present ideas and proposals. Of course, we're looking at the greater picture of what we presented, where we haven't, what kind of work we haven't presented. Also working with some other entities, like say we did with Rule and like we did with Anthony at Alto, and giving opportunity to just some other curators too, to do some interesting things that maybe they don't get to do. And we're super excited about the range of the programming we were thinking about for the next 6 months. So I know Michael would probably say the same thing. And of course it'll evolve and things won't all work out, but we're excited about it. So,
well, it's been cool to see the evolution from that True West show or Wild Wild show.
Yeah.
To now. I mean, it really has been fun to watch how the space has been utilized, what artists you've had in there. And it's exciting. You should be proud, man. You really should.
Thank you.
I know it's just a shit ton of work.
It's been a lot of work.
For as many shows as you guys have put on. I just think to myself, I'm like, holy crap, there's another show. I'll see a post on social media. I'm like, oh, this show's coming up. I'm like, God, they just had a show.
Oh, dude, that time where we had those pop-ups, it felt like 4 shows in a row, because we had done the promotional kind of connection with New Denver. And then we had already had the little baked in idea with May the 4th, for Star Wars. And then we had turned around in 3 days and had 3 solo shows that we had to put up after knocking that whole thing down. And that was probably the hardest time of it. But this is the trapping and the beauty of it all. Like, I'm generally the marketer, right? Like I worked in that industry. I can design the stuff. I do all the communication materials most of the time. Sometimes we'll let the artists kind of push their own stuff a little bit. I like to have a consistency in that. And I'm good at that stuff. But that's the hard part too, is that we're doing some of the day-to-day management stuff and then also doing a lot of the graphic work and a lot of the design work, and then trying to keep that top of mind. And then look, I'm not the first to tell you, like at 48, I'm not the greatest at the whole posting revolution and figuring out Instagram and making it interesting every day. So now that's like a full-time job, like just trying to keep relevant and promote and connect with other artists and other galleries and other stuff. So it really is crazy. I'm like, God, I did not think it would be this much going on the way in. I was like, my God, this is a lot. And Michael, same thing. He's got so much work. I'll say it. I put a post out a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, how thankful we are to the community of artists that have made this place what it is. We absolutely positively could not have made this work without the community of artists that have been a part of it, that have helped mend holes and paint and build walls and make signs and just herd the cats that we are as artists and all that stuff. But there's a whole group of people that have been incredible. To name a few, Brett Fox and Eric Anderson and Michael Bacchiano and Jen Starling and certainly so many more that have been in huge support. But there's so many great artists that have essentially made this work. You know what I mean? And certainly all the artists that have said yes to exhibiting here. It's been the most, I think we give them the value and credit. Michael's name, I think, really led a lot of credibility. And I'd like to think that I have some of that too, but they are taking, a little bit of a leap to a certain degree. And we're not, a 10-year reputable gallery or any of that stuff. We're a new space and a new idea. And so we really appreciate their trust,
I think it shows just how wonderful the art community in Denver is as a whole, and, what a great space, how amazing of a job you guys have done with this thing, and sometimes it's best to go in totally naive about how it's going to, without a plan.
I had no choice.
Right. You just figure it out, fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. I mean, we had ideas. Yeah. But
I know you don't want to show your hand too much, but what can we expect to see at least in the next month or so?
So I think a value is, my family keeps saying, where's your art? Where's your art? Like, you open a gallery, where's your art? I'm like, that's not what this is about. Like, it's not my art. This is about getting art everybody else. And it's like, you'll see mine. And potentially, I'd like to do a solo show in this space, maybe in December or something like that. Cause I think I need to do it. I need to grow from that. One of my point in saying so is that the flexibility that we have to be able to bring interesting things. And July came fast and furious once we talked to Unico and they said, yeah, we want to give you more of this. And we're like, okay, let's get started. But some of Jess Davis and Michael Dowling had a recent show, collaborative show together over at the Clayton Social Club. And that was an amazing undertaking. We're going to bring that show over because it only had a 2-week stint. And we feel like there's a lot of value in that collaboration. We're going to bring that over for July because it's close in proximity as far as time. And also it's just a great show that needs to be seen for longer. So we're excited to bring that collaboration over. So Michael will be in here again. And I think his work deserves that. We have some conversations in 2 other spaces in July that I don't want to kind of peek too much on. We have a good friend of mine that we want to give opportunity for, another person outside of a few people we've had of kind of outside the state, but most of them have connection to it one way or the other. So my good friend, Mark Johnson, who's actually in Atlanta, but was in the mountain towns for a while. He's amazing, both abstract painter, but also landscape painter, and does it in a way that's super wonderful. We want to try some things that are different, but also like not expected from us a little bit, and maybe even traditional at times. Well, I guess I can say a little bit about July. We're kind of splitting up one of our spaces in July to support one of our very favorite artists out of the state who's been a new great entity and will be a sister kind of collaborator in Sacramento. And that's Lynn Fei. And I think you may have seen some of her work in Wild Wild. We connected, and she connected with an amazing group of people kind of through COVID and last year. But her and Alex Pangburn, who's doing Babe Walls, right, which is the all-female kind of muraling project. Lynn Fei's coming out for that mid-July. And what we wanted to do is break up July and give her an opportunity and support Babe Walls to a certain degree as well. So we're giving Lynn, while she's here for that like week and a half, 2 weeks, kind of carte blanche one of the spaces to kind of almost like residency, if you will, for a moment. Do what you want, and what she wants to do is support Babe Walls. She's also going to have this construct that I think her and Michael and potentially some other artists are going to work with, that I'm not going to put too much out there because I want her to be able to do more of that. But yeah, so we know we're going to support Lynn Fei coming back to town. We love her, and kind of subsequently also support kind of Babe Walls a little bit by promoting one of their artists, and also maybe doing a little something for their group in her space, like maybe a little get together for them, something like that. But and then we got one artist on the we're excited about for July. Also, a couple other thoughts, but we're working on something to potentially support Platform. It hasn't really been inked yet, but we've been talking about helping them and offering up the space for a lot of their artists who are all kind of immigrant population and doing amazing things, and they're supporting that population and bringing their art in here. We've got a bunch of ideas, but without having confirmed a lot of them, I don't want to go too far into them.
Right.
No, I don't blame you.
Hopefully that's a little bit to bite on, a little bit to
Yeah.
on.
I love that you guys have been really trying to open the space up to artists that are underrepresented in a lot of galleries, that you're giving artists voice in your gallery. And I just think that's spectacular. So just like the show that you have currently going on, it's a spectacular show and incredibly compelling.
And again, I think we can go through the whole conversation about what value looks like. And to me, value looks like exactly that. I mean, and I think, Michael's the perfect person to have that conversation around, right? Like someone who has been widely respected and has had his share of chances and has a great opportunity in very, great kind of high-end circles of Denver art. But in the end, there's always an opportunity to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, and to give as many artists an opportunity. And of course, we wish we had, 7 versions of this, and could have that many spaces. God, I would have a heart attack. But I mean, if we could, we would love to give so many artists an opportunity. And of course, even with the 3 spaces and hopefully having that many shows a month, we would love to do even more. But yeah, I mean, I think in the end, sometimes it's just, Michael said it in regards to kind of how we felt about an all female lineup and 3 very different, female artist experiences. When I say 3, 3 different groups, that we just don't know what we don't know as kind of, males, white males in the art business in Denver. Like, there's a whole group side of things that we want to learn from and say, what is it that we don't know because of our experience? We can guess, but the only real way to get that value is to see it and to perpetuate it and to get out of the way of it. You know what I mean? And try not to, put our thumb on it, So that's really what this has been about a lot too. And just having different conversations. I mean, Denver is awesome right now in that, the diversity is really changing in, I think, a lot of the neighborhoods, and that makes me super happy. And, I don't know. It's almost like one of those things it's like coy, or maybe you don't need to talk about it, you don't want to talk about it. But as someone who grew up here, and wanted a real sense of people not exactly like me, so I understood more about the world. My wife said, man, I walked in there and it was like awesome. There was all sorts of people from all walks of life and all different demographics. And it was amazing, like it's amazing to see that, what that's, kind of done for, I think, the art and the society and the culture of Denver, to have a diversity of types of people. And so it was kind of fun to have an amazing, a very diverse group of people in this gallery, and have such great experiences being portrayed within that. So, without patting ourselves on the back, it's really about the opportunity and the amazing people that we found that had just amazing stories and things to present. And some of those, are just overwhelming. But so yeah, it's just been good and very happy for that. I would definitely say, do not miss this group of women and the work that they have put up, and the diversity of the style of work, that the conversations within it, Even where they come from as far as what they're thinking about in art, how it affects their lives, and what it means for them to be doing it, and what it means for their communities to be doing it. So it's a really great group of work. And I will say, talking about things to come, our goal, I haven't, everyone's still kind of got the, day two hangover from a great opening, but we've talked a lot about getting all of the artists in this show for an artist talk, just all of them together, and just seeing what that sounds like and acts like, and just having such a great group of women come together and talk about what it is to be a female artist in Denver within their communities. And I think that would be amazing. We're trying to get that to happen during this month. And we want each of them, to activate the space however best they can. And we're going to help them do that. So hopefully there'll be some other cool things that happen during this month that kind of activate their shows and their ideas. So
when does that show close?
Yeah, but they have the rest of this month. But yeah, I mean, I think, don't sleep on that, because there'll be other opportunities to see other events during that. And we're going to try to do some music. I've got a couple of unique ideas and some people that have kind of come to the forefront, and we're just trying to do things that maybe wouldn't expect too. So, I mean, there could be some really cool music this month as well, just as a kind of a pop-up. So yeah, there's going to be a couple of things, I think, that would be even before that 26th date. So
I think your wife described it perfectly. That description that you said, that seeing the diversity of people and the eclecticness of the work was just spectacular this past weekend. And I would love it if you put together that, if you guys do that artist talk, man, if anybody's listening to this and in Denver, don't miss out on that, because I think that would be just absolutely spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
I want to circle back to your own work. I want you to talk a little bit about the show that you did, the collaboration with you and Michael back in March, and describe in detail what that was all about, because I thought that was a very unique and interesting concept, the way you guys did that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said about the idea of building the ship as we were sailing it, I think I'm not ashamed to say, month 2, we're like, okay, what's the best value out of this? We both knew we wanted to have some work in it, but he and I hadn't really had a chance, but there's some small projects to collaborate. And we said, because we were building this thing, neither of us had time to put together a full show for an opening. And we were like, well, what does that mean? Well, we both loved the idea of collaboration being the show, and often talk about how, the artist process, the opening is like the last, 1% of the creative process. Like 99% of it is how you get there, and the decisions, and seeing the process, and all of the work that goes into it. So we said the real show is that works in process. And so that was the show Michael and I put together, Works in Process. And it's very interesting that we come from such different backgrounds when it comes to art. He's so classically trained, trained in Italy to draw and to paint, and his subject matter is so different than mine. But yet, because we use this very graphic approach and have this very sentiment of kind of emotional tenor right within it, they somehow work together. And so we've often had this kind of balance that felt like our work felt like it could go side by side. And what it really did for me is, I kind of studio by myself. It's been my garage that I built in my house. And even though we did, lots of stuff with Zeel and the collective, and still do, it was always kind of singular. And so for me, it was getting back again, like I said, and collaborating. And that's what has been amazing. It also gave me license. Like, for example, I put lots of stipulations on my work. And so I've stayed away from paper. I've stayed away from reproduction. I've stayed from a lot of that most of the time. I do some things, but there's things I've just stayed away from. But it gave me license to work with Michael on his pieces. So what we did is literally set it up as, an open studio, and we had a lot of blank canvas and had a lot of parts, had a few pieces that we knew we wanted to rework, or other idea pieces that were in there. And you walked in and it felt like you were in someone's studio. It did not feel like the beginning of a show. And it was the beginning, but it just wasn't the finished beginning, right? So we really got a chance to collaborate, and we would put up sketches. I'd sketch something, and I'd say I would transfer something over the top of it. And then Michael, I would transfer a piece, and I'd say, draw over this. And we put our sketches up there. We had some great ideas for collaboration installation. We would sketch those, and so it was really like just a studio, and we invited people in to see that. What it did is it gave me a chance to step out of bounds a little bit and do some things that I don't do. So I did a full paper piece and a kind of mixed media, almost collage type of piece. Michael and I sketched things and then reproduced those on my wood pieces. He had beautiful drawings he had done, and then I kind of articulated over the top, and we created this voice that was both singular, and you could see the thread of our own work, but then combined and created something super interesting. And that show was really, I don't know, it was so eye-opening for me to not getting caught in the idea of what you do or your process, like getting out of that and working with others. And we have some amazing artists that have tried to push me in that way too, and do a great job of it. Eric Anderson and Brett Fox and others. But it was a great way for that to happen. That show is actually going to be featured as kind of an appreciation in New Denver Magazine this summer. We had Brett Fox take a bunch of great shots of that show before it went down, and he'll do a retrospective article on that show between Michael and I, and we're super excited for that sometime in one of their magazines this summer. The two of us have a different sensibility. Obviously, we talked about my kind of work that is very singularly focused on kind of environmental issues, but there was a very interesting dance between kind of Michael's work, which is about a lot about humanity, human construct, and kind of some of the history, kind of playful history of art, and just kind of interplaying these things. And so we had a good, well, I hate to say, like, a lot of fun doing it and just being around each other and spending that time together. But also really learned a lot. And I think let down some of the guard and actually have some really good pieces that we're excited to show in that magazine, but also find a good home for, you know what I mean? A good collector and something that we've, been excited about. So we're excited to work together more. And I'm actually excited for people to see more of Michael's collaborative work. I think he and Jess Davis's stuff is super amazing. And we're super excited to have that in the gallery in July. And so I'm super excited for that to be the next good show of collaboration. But then, it just leads to other great things, leads to open-mindedness. I've done a little collaborating with Eric Anderson. He's incredibly talented young artist and had an incredible show, last month. It's like I mentioned, did some incredible and off the cuff kind of creativity within the dance kind of and drawing kind of collaboration. But then was doing some really great stuff with Brett Fox. He had done stuff within his show with Jim White, who's an amazing artist, and threw some stuff at me. And he and I did a little collaborating. And so the process just keeps building. And, certainly, again, not the first artist to say it, but that collaboration is what really breeds and drives kind of great creativity.
Talk about this piece, Looking at Betrayal.
So I've used some of these constructs in my work before. I do this a lot with my work, where I take opposing elements and kind of force them together to create this narrative around kind of these environmental issues. I use certain kind of metaphorical elements a lot, and I use bison a lot in my work. I use things like airplanes, cityscape, things that are kind of indicative of one of the two sides of this kind of conversation around nature and humanity's kind of imposition on it. And so I always have those two elements in all of my work, usually at odds with each other, and usually to create some tension and or to at least force conversation of like, what the hell are you doing, or why is that? This piece was different in that I freed myself. I worked on paper, and I was kind of playful. I was overlapping. I was transferring on stuff. I was adding pieces of parts over. I often use kind of laser cut materials that come from the kind of photo illustrations as elements, dimensional elements. But this is the first time I had kind of done it more, I don't know, freely and more almost as a impromptu installation. So, on this piece, you have a bison kind of upside down, kind of actually a felled bison kind of, which is unusually kind of then on the top of the page.
and I kind of overlapped it. So there's a lot of texture there, but you get the sense of it. And at the bottom is actually very random kind of typography and text. Kind of brought about more of a humanity piece to it. It was actually kind of just a little leftover parts of a commission piece I had done. And it's actually just a favor, not even a favor, more of an added piece to the family of some old type that they had kind of scratched in as kids into the table. It was very meaningful to them. And it was meaningful to me as kind of a human element and the positive part of it. I use quotes I mentioned quite a bit in my work because I think it adds that secondary narrative. And this one, nature never did betray the heart that loved her, I've used quite a few times because I think it boils down the general sentiment of my belief system and the general way that my work kind of contemplates this humanity, which is, and that's Wordsworth. And the idea is, if we treat her well, we will find a balance and we will be treated well. And when we don't, we don't. And I think that's the goal, is to treat ourselves more like we're part of nature as opposed to something on the outside looking in. But I've been using these elements of kind of humanity's, more aggressive side, sometimes their industrial side. And sometimes I see seems like they're one and the same. And so I've used this AK-47 and kind of put humanity kind of, industrialism kind of on its back, because I see there's almost like one and the same, and in that, I use the color red as kind of I think is a quite obvious, play or ploy to kind of the violence of it all. And it says Homo sapien in the middle of all of that, which is kind of, I hate to say, but it's the thing that tends to push us maybe beyond all the rest of our kind of animal brethren, right? Which is how we use our technology, how we use our abilities of conceptual thought and this beautiful brain and all those other things still end up in this very difficult and kind of destructive place a lot of the time, and kind of self-destructive. And so I guess the idea is that the combination of these elements, the typography and the words, the kind of metaphor for all nature, which is the bison, and these kind of more quintessential kind of portions of kind of human growth and history, which is, war apparatus and city and industrialism, kind of create this triangular kind of idea and conversation around what is betrayal, right? What have we done? What looks like betrayal, from this humanity to nature. And I it was just a piece that, I can't tell me how many people have said this was their favorite from the show. Also, so many people have said, especially those who have seen a lot of my work, that this is their favorite piece that I've done. And I think there's something to be said about the simplicity of it, but also just the just pure stark kind of emotion of it as well.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's a fantastic piece.
Thank you.
So what other kinds of things are you working on right now? I know that you were working on a big project. Are you at a point where you can talk about that?
Yeah. I love to be and do all things. I think you can't take yourself into a place, regardless of how, great conceptually or artistically or how many opportunities you have. I think it's important to be, really true to who you are and the things that you enjoy and the things that kind of got you there, and also continue to be part of the community conversation in that. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of grew up in the advertising game in beer, and it's been a big part of my life. I'm a huge beer head, and I'm a big, huge, local beer guy. And I love it so much that I'll pop up my tent with some of my friends, over at Zunai Street or over at the Stag Brewing or any of these groups, because I just love the combination. To me, it's like, being true to who you are. And I love kind of being where just regular people are, and talking about work and talking about environmentalism. So I've recently had an opportunity that's kind of, I guess, it feels like it's been bred over time, right? It's like a confluence of all the things of my life. Some good friends in the old game advertising really kind of hooked me up with a great conversation with, my old life, which is the beer industry, and some of the great players of that. And it's kind of proud to say, I guess, for the first time kind of publicly, that I'm working with and have been asked by Wynkoop Brewing to do some original works for a new line, kind of just crowler cans. They're in-store crowler cans to just promote the arts in Denver and promote artists in Denver. And so I'm kind of the maiden voyage on that. And I'm super happy to be kind of collaborating with them. There's a lot of synergy, I think, with just kind of perseverance, kind of caring a lot about the city, being, kind of, made from the same metal, which is just going out and doing it, enjoying nature, being part of it. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Wynkoop, even from early on, was doing a lot of great sustainable practices with how they brewed and how they used their malt and all the other things they did with it. And they've never really touted it a lot either. So it makes me happy as kind of environmentalist. They are super receptive to starting something really genuine in promoting Denver artists. And I think that's the most important thing to me. And I told them that's what Bridge is about. And that's also what I'm about, which is I just like the idea that I could help them kind of kick off this idea to potentially continue on this crowler can line as a way to promote and support Denver artists. And we just feel, I think, both very, very positive about how that's always been part of kind of what Denver in particular kind of this kind of new younger Denver has been, from 1988 when they started to now. It's always just been kind of helping each other out and being part of, supporting the city. So I'm super excited about it. It's I did some original pieces for them, that kind of elaborate on their future, of their past, a little bit of where they're going. Also just kind of playing on the sentiment of growing up in this town. I told you I used to ride my bike around and just see the city go up. And I was probably spent way too many nights in Wynkoop when I was a young man, drinking. So it's kind of like this confluence of all great things, but just also like the tenacity of and the fun of Denver people, like kind of the work hard, play hard, and get up in the mountains and enjoy it, but also revere it. And then we just had some fun. So I've got 3 cans coming out really soon. It'll be really fun, I think, to see how that's received. But I think most importantly is just also helping a brand that through COVID, like a lot of the restaurant industry had really struggled, and helping a brand do something fun and something different as it kind of comes up, and maybe there's a way we can catch a little lightning, is super meaningful to me, because I feel like they're one of the ones that started it all around here, like even creativity wise, like, and I know it's, kind of hard not to get political, but because we know Hick was part of that, but I think in the end, like they took a chance, like a lot of people have, and they did something creative. Right. And they were doing this beer thing in a place that a lot of people said, you shouldn't be doing that. And why are you doing it? And it really did spark a lot of all of this, them and baseball and a few other things back in that late 80s and early 90s. And so to me, it's like a full circle with kind of the arts community now. It's like just being creative and kind of crafting something, and I think that's how they're talking about it, is kind of original kind of crafting, series. So, I'm super excited about it. And yeah, this is kind of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. And in the next kind of week or two here, I think a lot more of that will be shown and come out. So I'm glad that you asked, and we can talk a little bit about that.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. And they're really eager to support, kind of the local art scene. And I think that's what's great. And, we all know any little bit helps. And it's also really cool to have something that's can be kind of a tangible piece of art in people's hands, whether they are looking for it or not. So I'm excited. And it's just fun for me too, because I'm a super beer nerd. So that's the way it goes. Who's got a nice Saison around here? I'm looking for a beer right now.
There you go.
So I'm going to ask you a few more business questions here before we let you go. How do you go about selling your art? Is it mostly via your website? You get a lot of commissions. It's been a lot of networking and connections. How does that work in your world?
I mean, it's all of the above, and it's really evolved over the course of this, like I mentioned earlier, this kind of really this like 13, 14-year journey when I kind of decided I was shifting out of the ad business. I've learned a lot. And I think early on, I was really adamant while I did a lot of those shows. I was like, dude, I'm a young marketer. I can promote myself. I'm not doing gallery. I was like kind of dead set against gallery. I was like, I'll do it on my own. And so I would just pop these shows up and do it that way. I did my website. I've never really felt a connection to the website thing. And I know so many people that do so well that way. but it just has never been my game. So I wanted to be where people were. So a good percentage of my last 8 years of art has been getting out and being in these community arts areas and festivals and other things. Like, to me, they're so valuable because I get to see and talk to real people. And I said it earlier, it's important to me because my message is almost, I mean, it's almost as important to me as, any of it, and certainly more so than sales at times. I mean, I can't tell you how many art pieces and prints and other things I've given away because some little person kind of was excited about something I was doing. And to me, that's the most important part. So a good percentage of my income comes from just doing the wonderful shows. Like, I'll be in the Crested Butte Art Festival this year. Michael and I had reached out to them too about seeing if there was a way, they wanted to promote through the gallery here. We haven't had a chance to connect. They're super crazy, obviously, having gone through such a rough year as a group, done some great things. I will do a few more, potentially all the way to Chicago. And then commissions, definitely. We also, and I failed to mention this earlier, one of the accessible parts of the gallery is we put in a little store. I mean, we have a little storefront here called, the museum store. And the goal was to have smaller things, prints and smaller pieces and originals and other things to, again, help as many of the artists as we can get out there. And I also think it's a really, really important part of like showing accessibility to this space. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people walk up off of the stairs, from coming down from the bridge, and they walk towards us and they feel less comfortable going to the contemporary gallery, but the store is like this liaison to them. Like, it's something that they feel comfortable in. And so to me, that's a perfect example of like what accessible art means. And so the store to me is a valuable thing. And so we sell out of here, and I've sold some stuff out of here too. And a lot of it is word of mouth, people that have seen my work, have a love of the same thing I love. I still do some other, beautifully wonderful, small, and sometimes not even that lucrative things, like build furniture for people and build unique little things out of reclaimed and repurposed stuff, because I just like doing it and I think it's fun. So, I just like I think if it's not obvious at this point, I just like making stuff for people and making them happy, even when it doesn't make me a lot of money. So yeah, I mean, a good portion of it. The website, if I was going to be completely honest, it is probably the least valuable thing to me right now, because I haven't really spent a lot of time with it. Most of the time it's connectivity through Instagram and then doing shows and obviously a little bit of Bridge Project now too. I like to think that what we're building here will translate into maybe even personal success when it comes to art at some point too, whether we actually have our work in here or not. I think it just allows for the opportunity to have more, connect with more people, have more eyeballs on your work and opportunity. So yeah, I mean, there's mostly it's just, commissions and festivals and the gallery shows we put on here. So that's what I'm doing.
Pre-COVID, how many festivals would you usually do during the course of a year?
Yeah, I mean, it would be totally different. Depending on, so one of the things that I think I mentioned earlier is that I'm lucky enough to be a full-time dad too, of two young kids that are amazing, and that really took precedence a lot of times over art early on in this last 8 or 9 years. A lot of it just meant I worked late and were with them, early on, but it really just centered around that too, because like I mentioned, my wife does incredible things for the veteran population at the VA, and that was as important to me as anything I was doing. So supporting her was supporting them. And so if I had the ability to do as many shows as I did, I did. If I didn't, we kind of set back a little bit. So I would say anywhere from, like 10 to 12 in a given kind of calendar season. And then, I've cut that down actually, because you find out where your sweet spots are and where your demographic, meaning the people that care about your work and the people that are like-minded. And, 2020 was shaping up to be kind of the year that we were super excited about. We're going to do some cool stuff. We were going to run around, do a couple of shows in Chicago. We were trying to go to California and really find a population that was really, I think, excited about my work. But you know how it goes. That shifted, and we created something else. You know what I mean? And it's been, I mean, for better for worse, to my own work, it's been way more valuable, to everything else, to everything we've been wanting to do. So
it's always an evolution, man. And, everybody says the same thing. Like, hey, I used to do this. Now I do this, and something changed in my business model, or, we get thrown something like COVID and it changes everything. So I'm just curious, kind of what's on people's minds these days and how much they'll go back to doing some of the things they were doing pre-COVID,
Yeah. I mean, if I continue on this path, it's way different than pre-COVID because, like we said, we built something crazy in the middle of COVID, this awesome gallery. And if we get to perpetuate it for as long as we can, we're going to do that. So my existence have changed a lot. I will still do a bunch of shows because I love doing it. I love being in the mountains. I love being out. Like, my wife knows me well, and she knows, she's like, there's no better place for me other than be talking to people I don't know and just like listening and hearing who they are and like experiencing that, being out in nature, and then being able to just talk about the things I care about. Like, it's kind of exactly where I should be almost all the time. And so even though I was making, whatever is valuable, millions of dollars, $5, whatever, and that was good, I would still do the other thing, because I just think it's awesome and fun. And I actually really like people, which is weird. I mean, for someone who's like so down on humanity at times, so I actually really like people.
Yin and yang thing, man.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. You like the individual, but hate the group.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I say. I'm like, I often say it. I know that's my crappy catchphrase. I often say, man is invariably good, but tragically flawed. I mean, that's the way I feel at times, just good at heart, but unfortunately can't get out of its own way at times. I hope that changes,
What's cool that you enjoy that connection, because I know for a fact, talking with art buyers and other artists, that the art buyer really loves that interaction with the artist and making that connection. And then when they're looking at those pieces to possibly purchase, it becomes something completely different. It's an experience, right?
For sure. And make no mistake, and I'm certainly not the first to say it. You buy the artist as much as you buy the art. And I'll give you an example of that. I mentioned I did the Park Hill Arts Festival. It's just a small one, and Darren does a great job with it. And I just love it. Again, it's a quick community over there that I think cares a lot about the arts. And last year he pushed it all the way late to, I don't know, September, October, and I did it way last minute. Like, I called him, I was like, dude, I didn't know you're doing this. And he's like, I'm doing it. I'm like, I'm in. And he found me a space because someone canceled. And I had this really young couple who had bought their first house and were just excited about art. And I made this piece. It was actually a piece I made for Michael's show that year for True West. And it was super compelling because she was a horse, kind of a horse aficionado. She rode for a long time. And I was their first like big art purchase. They bought a piece, for their center point of their house, $3,500 piece, which is a lot of money to them. And it was super exciting to be that purchase, you know what I mean? To this young couple, like wanting to start an art collection. Well, here comes this year, and the festival is going great, super cool. The heat comes out, which of course we've all been waiting for, but was pretty hot. So we kind of slowed down, and it had been a pretty slow, day. And then Sunday comes, and, good day, but, a little slow. And it was great. Met so many great people, so many great connections. And about an hour, maybe 40 minutes before close, this young couple comes up, and my dad had come down, and I was chatting with him, and they were looking for a long time. I'm like, well, let me know if there's anything I can help you with. Well, of course, I met them the year before with masks on and barely, could see anyways. And here it is, the same young couple, Caitlin and Michael. And I was like, oh my God, it's so great to see you. Talked them through some new work, super excited. And, 5 minutes before the end of that festival, they walked away with another original piece that they were super excited about. And I think that's what's exciting about it, is that, there's an approachability and also a real nature to the communication and the connectivity. They love my work. I love them as collectors. I love helping them kind of, become young collectors. And the way we left it was, I got to get you on over to this gallery and see all these amazing artists. Like, I can't wait to show you some of this other work that we're doing. And that's exactly what it's about to me, right? Like, you're saying, like, real connectivity. I guess it goes all the way back to what I said early on, right? It's about the same thing. It's, you like making stuff and you like giving it to people because you like affecting the world. You like affecting people. And that happened yesterday, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of it, just meet people. And I've done so many great kind of personal commissions. I have this whole other, it's not another construct. I've done these other pieces that are just super meaningful to people. And again, they're kind of like, I call them deconstructions, but it's essentially, instead of using my photography and my graphic ideas to create, I use their memories, their pieces, their parts, their journey to create something very personal for them. And a lot of times it's very abstract. Sometimes it's more literal. But it's so personal. I did a piece for Kyle and Amanda Henderson, who are very good friends of mine. Used to work with Kyle, and we've been dancing around doing a custom piece for them for years. She's a reverend, and he's in the building and creating, but they're just great people. And back to that art piece that you showed earlier, Todd. The typography that I had at the bottom, that kind of scratched up, kind of very rough, was from their children. It was on their table of 10 years, and it was all their spelling and spelling bees that had been gone through the paper and onto the wood. And the kids had a real affinity for this old, whatever, nice table, but not. It was kind of like American Furniture Warehouse, but it was like solid. It was great. They understood it. It'd been in their garage for a while because they'd moved past it, but they didn't want it to get thrown away because it was like all these memories of their youth. And that's exactly what I do with people. I said, that's perfect. We're going to use that table. And I cut that table up. We turned it into 2 beautiful big canvases. And we took all of their photography, their amazing family. They got 2 beautiful young girls in college age. And then they adopted a son from the Philippines. And they just have an incredible vivaciousness about them. They travel all over. They're all about connectivity and cultural connectivity. And so we created this piece out of these very meaningful old table for all of them, and created this incredible kind of visual of who they are as a family and the travels they've done. And it was this massive 2-panel piece. And it was just, I'm not more happy about, anything else than doing something like that for someone, right? Because it's so personal.
I have one more question for you, Brett.
Yeah.
How do you go about pricing your art? We ask this to almost every artist that we have on the podcast. And I know for you, it's more about connection, but as our friend Bob Ragland would say, everybody has to heat and eat. So how do you go about pricing your art?
I've had this conversation with you. One artist in particular, actually one of the festivals, said, people will buy what you think you're worth, and I think that's exactly that. The more sense of worth that you have within your work, the time and energy and the person that you've put into it, the value it brings, I think the more comfortable you are with pricing and or finding, say, a sweet spot within especially a higher price range of your work. I'm always on the low end because I think that's the nature of who I am. It's not what drives me. But what I found is that as I've respected my own work more, as I've appreciated my own process more, the way fewer times I'm worried about whatever price point I put on it. So if I can't give you an explicit answer to say it's hours times this times that times, I can't, but I can tell you it's about my own personal belief in the worth of my work. And I will say this too, and I do think there's something to this. I think it's not the company you keep per se, but the experiences you've had and the artists you've gotten a chance to show with, and the things that then, the collaborators you've worked with, and those things all add up to, I think, a value system to a certain degree too. Like, it gives you more. It's like someone who travels, right? You just feel like, they've seen it all. They maybe have more knowledge. Well, I feel like the same thing is, like, the more you have an opportunity to show with your great artists, the more you have an opportunity to collaborate with those great artists. I think the more it gives you opportunity to kind of inch your work towards a price point that maybe is a little bit more valuable. But literally, there's an old saying in the art festival business, and maybe it goes the other way too, but it's like people will buy they will buy your lowest priced item. And so, that's really where they go. And so if your lowest priced item is, $1,000, then they're going to buy $1,000 piece, and if your lowest priced item is a $50 print, they're going to buy a $50 print. And there's no wrong in either of those things. You know what I mean? I actually believe wholeheartedly that someone should be able to take away a piece of art from who you are, whether that's a $20 print or $5,000, $10,000 original. To me, if the idea of it is that you are meant to affect someone with your work, then that can't just be about rich people buying your work. It just can't. It can't be about just someone saying, I saved up to do this. It's, you want them to be able to be affected, and you have to be able to have that price point, in my opinion. And that's the way I priced my work, in that I literally have an 8x10, original print that is always going to be $20 for that little kid or that other person that just wants a little something, that loves my work. And it's not going to devalue the fact that I have the $4,300 original kind of piece that I, put a bunch of building time, sweat and tears, repurposed dumpster diving and everything else into, and beyond, but so I guess it's a roundabout way of avoiding the question, but at the same time, giving you some meat on the bone for, how I think about it.
Yeah. So my last question is, what's it mean to be bold as an artist? What's it mean to be bold?
I mean, on a personal level, to me, what it means to be bold is just being exactly who and what you want to do. Like there is nothing that hasn't come before you already in this art thing. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, there's always going to be original stuff, but the fact of the matter is that we've all found ways to kind of build ourselves on the back of the things that have come before. So to me, it's like, I think the most important thing about if the idea is in those words is just to do exactly what it is that you think is the right kind of path and the right work for you. And other than that, I don't really think about that much often, other than like, yeah, you should be true to your voice and not try to tone it down and that kind of stuff. But I think generally artists do that, I think most artists are not really that afraid. That's just never been their DNA anyway. So again, it's almost like undercuts the context of that a little bit anyway. But to me, it's just generally being true to exactly what, the art that you want to be creating. And not being afraid of some of that is like stuff like I was just talking about, which may not further my like kind of, greater kind of, body of work when it comes to, the consistency of what I'm doing, but maybe is super compelling for what I want to be doing, which is giving amazing work to amazing people and having them remember it for the rest of their life, maybe in multiple generations, like that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Thanks. That's a great answer. I love that.
Thank you. Well, some great questions. I appreciate it.
Man, it's been so nice to spend time with you this evening. It's been an absolute honor. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening away from your family. I say it all the time. Time is the most precious thing we have. And I know you're an incredibly busy person. So I so appreciate you coming on and talking with us and telling us about everything that's going on, not only with your art, but also with the Bridge Project. And I really appreciate what you do for the art community and what you're doing with Bridge, with Michael, and all the time, blood, sweat, and tears that you guys are putting into this whole thing.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. And I really appreciate your humility too, because you're a very humble person, because you're doing great things. And so I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. In the end, like I said, just do what you can to make sure you feel good about, the people you're affecting in the world. And in the end, yeah, you build around community. It's going to be good. But I really appreciate what you all do. I know, especially in a time of COVID and just in general, to give all sorts of voice to all sorts of different types of artists, some that are really up there and doing really great things, and some that are on their way, and some that are just, really compelling and interesting. I just think that's a really cool thing. And so I, again, applaud you all both for giving that voice, however amplified, to the creative community. Very much so like Wynkoop's about to do. I think it's very admirable what you all are doing. So thank you for giving that voice. And regardless if anyone wants to listen to me for an hour or two, I don't know, but I appreciate the opportunity. So
thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will have all the information in the episode notes as always this week. And for the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.